calling the meeting of the Joint Economic Development Organization to order. And this is the May 9th, 2018 meeting for this organization. If we could begin, Madam Secretary, with a call of the roll.
Commissioner Bueller? Commissioner Cook?
Here.
Commissioner Archer?
Here.
Mayor De La Isla? Here. Deputy Mayor Jensen?
Present.
Councilmember Padilla?
Here.
Councilmember Lesser?
Here.
Councilmember Hiller? Councilmember Clear? Councilmember Ortiz? Councilmember Emerson? Councilmember Mays? Councilmember Cohen?
Before we begin, due to that we have some members that are not present, do the assembled members constitute a quorum?
Yes, we have 6 and a quorum is 4.
Okay, very good. So we can proceed. If we could have our first item.
Item 3, action item, approval of February 28th, 2018 JEDO board meeting minutes and approval of March 14th, 2018 JEDO board meeting minutes.
Members, you should have had these ahead of time to review. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes for the February 28th, 2018 meeting and the March 14th, 2018 meeting? And are there any questions or corrections to those minutes?
No, I make a motion for approval.
There's been a motion to approve by Mayor De La Isla, second by Councilmember Padilla. If we could just have a hand vote. All in favor, please raise your left hand. All opposed? Passes unanimously. Our next item.
Item 4, action item, approval of funding for Project Marble.
Good evening. So before you have some information on an existing business that's in growth mode here in Shawnee County, and they are looking to expand and add 20 additional jobs over the next 5 years. The average wage of those jobs will be $40,000. So we are asking for an approval of an incentive in the amount of $80,000 for those jobs over the next 5 years. This company is a commercial transportation company, and they are looking at purchasing a new site and expanding their building footprint as well. But within our current guidelines, the amount of their investment doesn't warrant any incentives for their capital investment. So we're just looking at incentivizing these new jobs. They currently have 17 employees, so they would be at 37 after 5 years if their plan comes to fruition. So I would stand for any questions about Project Marble.
So to begin with, in order to receive the incentive, what do they need to do? What do they need to show? They
need to prove that they have added 20 new jobs with an average wage of $40,000 a year. And then they would be paid out the incentives over a period of 5 years like we do with all of our other incentives. And on a performance-based incentive, each year they are audited and their records are looked at to make sure that they are performing how they have planned, and then they're paid out their incentives based on what they added to their employment count.
And during each year that this is in existence, this is $4,000 per new job. If they don't hit the 20, they only have 10, what happens?
They only get paid for the 10. So this is kind of new for Topeka. Some of the older incentives, most of those have fallen off, but most of the new incentives are performance-based so that there aren't clawbacks involved and they're only paid as they perform.
Are there other questions by the members? Okay.
Make a motion for approval.
There's been a motion for approval by Mayor De La Isla, second by Councilmember Jensen. If we could just have a roll call vote on this.
Left and right.
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Archer?
Aye.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Councilmember Jensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Padilla?
Yes.
Councilmember Lesser?
Yes.
Molly, before you leave, what would be the timeline for us to maybe have more information about Project Marble and who they are or their plans?
I think what they're waiting on right now is acquiring that new piece of property, and so once that's done, they're ready to go public. So hopefully when we have our next JEDO meeting, they will be here to be able to address you all, and you'll be able to meet the company, and we'll have a contract on the agenda at that time too.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next item.
Item 5, action item, approval of Go Topeka 2017 financial statements and auditor's report.
Good evening. I'm Morgan Paget with the audit firm Mayer Hoffman McCann. So what I've got for you today is the 2017 audited financials for Go Topeka that I'm just going to walk you through and point out some of the highlights for you. Just a couple of things to note before we get started with this. This is a little different than what you're used to seeing on the quarterly statements. Our audit includes both the public dollars that you give and also private funds that Go Topeka raises. And then the quarterly reports that you're used to seeing are on a modified cash basis, and these are full accrual. So there are some differences in the way things are accounted for. So if we just look at pages 1 and 2, it's our actual audit report is on pages 1 and 2, and this gives our opinion. We did give a clean, unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which means they were in accordance with the accounting standards as required. Page 3 is the statement of financial position. This has got the assets and liabilities. For 2017, total assets were $28.4 million. Most of that is sitting in cash and cash equivalents and investments. That's about $19,000 together. There's $2 million sitting in restricted funds. That's the Mars escrow that's been funded and hasn't been drawn yet by Mars. And then 7.3 for land held for economic development, and that's the land that's been purchased and waiting to be given for incentives as needed. Total liabilities for 2017 was $19.6 million. Majority of that is in the deferred grant revenue for JEDO. That is in funds that you have approved to be carried over into future years to spend, so it's in deferred revenue. And then the other one is, the other big liability is the improvement in training incentives, and that's the amount that Mars has earned and just not drawn yet out of the escrow account. And then there's an agency fund as well for Governor's Military Council. So total net assets of $8.8 million, and that's the difference that assets exceed liabilities, and most of that is unrestricted for the year. Page 4 is the statement of activities. It's going to show the revenue and expenses. On this page, look at the total column for 2017. Total support and revenue is $2.5 million. Most of that is in JEDO grant revenue. Again, these are on an accrual basis, so for that purpose, that revenue is only recorded when it's expended, not when they're just getting the $5 million. And then that makes up most of the revenue. Total expenses were $4.1 million. Gets us to a net negative change in net assets of $1.6 million negative. Okay. Page 5 is the statement of cash flows. Gives you a little more information on how cash actually changed for the year. Net cash flows from operating activities is $2.3 million. That means day-to-day operations generated that amount. That number is that size mostly because they did receive $5 million in funds from this organization, just didn't spend it all. And then we had $205,000 generated from investing activities, and get you to a net increase in cash for the year of $2.5 million. Okay, the notes start on page 6. I'm not going to go through each of these, just some of the highlights. Note number 2 on summary of significant accounting policies. Just the thing to note is that there were no new policies and no changes to policies that were made during the year. We go back a couple of pages to footnote number 4 on the investments. Gives you a little more breakdown on how their excess funds are invested between money market funds and CDs. Note number 8 on restricted funds. This is going to give you how the Mars escrow account changed during the year, and that's on page 9, the bottom. There was 2.3 at the beginning of the year. Mars did draw out about $267,000 and then earn some interest to get you to the ending balance. That account has been fully funded in accordance with that, or the incentive agreement that happened in 15 or 16, I believe, when it was fully funded. So they're just waiting on Mars to use that fund, to use the money at this point. Okay, related party transactions, note number 11 talks about various transactions that occur between Go Topeka and the Chamber or related organizations. The first one talks about the purchase services agreement. This is the agreement between Go Topeka and Chamber, where Go Topeka did reimburse the Chamber $300,000 for certain services, administrative functions that were provided. Then there's some other amounts noted there. There are some small amounts owed between Go Topeka and other organizations just for reimbursements that need to be done or participation in certain chamber functions and events that need to be made. And then the last two that are noted there is that Go Topeka did make a contribution of $75,000 to 712 Innovations and $60,000 to Heartland Visioning, both of which are subsidiaries of the foundation, Chamber Foundation. Okay. The last note I want to mention is note number 12 on page 11. This is the JEDO grant. Of course, it describes the terms of the funds that they do get with them and notes that in 17, a new 3-year grant agreement was approved to start January 1 of 2018, and that you've approved carryover of the unspent funds. And of that unspent funds, $974,000 will be used on the minority and women-owned business program. Oh, I'm sorry, one last footnote. I got it one page ahead of myself. Note number 15 on page 12 talks about incentives. These are incentives that are planned to be paid out over the next coming years, assuming performance is done by those employers. These are not recorded as a liability because they are performance-based, so we're waiting on the employer to perform before they're actually incurred. But if everybody does what they're contracted to do, those are what would be paid out over the next couple of years. Okay. Now, I believe you also have a little 2-page letter from us at the back. This is what's addressed to the board. This is just kind of our report on how the audit went, and this is for the board of Topeka, but we do share it with you as well. It's pretty clean, standard stuff. There are just no issues in there. It does outline manager's responsibility for appropriate accounting policies, and those are all in note 1 and 2, like I talked about. Describes one key estimate as far as how expenses are allocated between programs and management in general, and then mentions that we did not have any material misstatements that we noted, and anything we did find that was immaterial has been corrected, and that we're not aware of discussions from the client with other accountants regarding like opinion shopping on our audit report. So there actually were no issues at all in our audit, and there is no management letter regarding internal control deficiencies.
Could we jump back to page 9, note 8?
Yep.
On the restricted funds? You mentioned that was for Mars as a restricted fund. In just recalling back, there was some discussion as to the construction, I believe, is a fire station. Is that what we're talking about with that restricted funds?
No, the fire station is actually in a separate liability account.
I'm sorry,
I
that's
didn't
note
point
10.
that out. It's the fire station is actually, if you look at page 3, which is the balance sheet, there's a $203,000 liability. That's the amount they're holding for that.
Okay.
The $2 million is outside of that. The $2 million is purely based on the incentive contract that was signed.
Okay. Very
Yes,
good.
Good question.
Thank you. Are there other questions that board members may have? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the the financial statements and auditor's report? It's been moved by Councilmember Lesser, second by Mayor Della Isla. A roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Archer?
Aye.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jensen?
Yes.
Councilman Padilla?
Yes.
Councilman Lesser?
Yes.
Thank you very
Thank
much. Matt, you're up for presentation of the quarterly report.
Thank you, governing body.
Oh, Madam Secretary, if you'll call.
Item 6, presentation, Topeka quarterly report.
Well, first of all, I want to mention a couple of new people in the room to JEDO meetings. First, I think it's appropriate since we just went through our audit. I wanted to mention and introduce that we have a new Senior Vice President of Finance, Natalie Zeller. Natalie is sitting right here, and we're very excited to have her on board. Don't ask her too many questions. She's been here for a little over about a week and a half, but I will say she has pretty good command already. I will say this, I want to brag on her just a little bit. First of all, we hired her from Payless, and that's the second employee that we've hired from Payless, and we're really happy about that. I would encourage anybody out there, I would challenge you, if you have an opportunity to hire a professional from Payless, they are really, really good employees, and I would encourage you to do that. There's some news out there. People don't want to go to Dallas, and so they're really looking and counting on our business community to interview them and to hire them. So I would implore everybody to encourage folks to hire people from Payless. The other thing I want to brag a little bit on Natalie is that we made her an offer. She needed to give a 3-week notice at Payless, and in that 3 weeks, she actually she's a CPA. She has an MBA in finance. She went to Washburn University. I think she was the president of the accounting club in her high school. But in that 3 weeks, she actually enrolled herself in a nonprofit nonprofit accounting certification class that she's going through right now. So I just want you to know that we're going to be in really good hands in the management of all of the funds that we're trusted with. The other person that's never been to a JEDO meeting is my wife, Wendy, so she's here. And so I just want to thank her for taking a little interest in what we're doing and just let you guys know that she's in the room. I do want to, Molly's getting ready to come up here, and I love it. It seems like we have a string of announcements and we have a string of projects. So I'm encouraging Molly to keep the string going. I want a big one soon. But Molly, what are we going to do at the next JEDO meeting? We need to have a good announcement at that time. I will say this, Molly mentioned audits. Audits are really important, and I will say Jackie will be back from maternity leave after Memorial Day. But I want you to know that we really do pour through the performance of these organizations and the audits, and we're very meticulous and careful with awarding incentives and making sure that the company is keeping their end of the bargain that we made with them. So please know that that's something that we take very, very seriously. I've seen some of the requests that Jackie has made to organizations. I actually saw her request 90 additional pages from one organization before she was to release an incentive. I want to thank you. I want to thank our elected leaders. I want to thank our staff, our team. You don't always get to see all of our team. And really just thank our volunteer leaders. A lot of you were at a reception beforehand where we celebrated a little bit of Momentum 2022. We did a bit of a Go Topeka annual meeting, talked a little bit about our progress on Momentum 2022. If you were there, you realized that we recognize how important JEDO is and our JEDO leaders. And I just thank you for taking so much interest in serving on JEDO, because last time I checked, I don't think that you were getting an extra stipend or anything like that to be here on Wednesday nights. So thank you very much. We did announce tonight in kind of a cool fashion that we raised $6.8 million from the private sector to help augment our economic development program. So when we talk about private public partnerships, I feel really good that the private sector has stepped up and invested their own dollars to get the return on investment to add what JEDO and our citizens already do. I did miss the last meeting, so I do want to also thank you and congratulate you on our accreditation by the International Economic Development Council. A little bit of a reminder, because I wasn't here and that was kind of a big deal for me, but I will say when I got to town, one of the things I asked is, when is our accreditation come due? Because you have to get reaccredited every so often, and I found out that we were not accredited. So we went through that process. Again, we're one of 62 accredited organizations. I'm not sure why. I challenge other economic development organizations to do this, but we're the first economic development organization in the state of Kansas to be accredited. All the states surrounding us, a lot of economic development organizations are accredited. So I just wanted to say I'm proud of you, I'm proud of our team, and I feel a lot better knowing that the IEDC felt like that we were a strong organization and that they awarded us our accreditation. The last thing that I'll say before I turn it over to our professional staff is really, speaking of being proud of accreditation, I'm proud of the team that we've assembled, the professional staff. Again, you don't get to hear from all of them. They'll be brief. They'll be more brief than I am. But I'm just really proud of the team that we've put together just across the board. And so with that, and speaking of proud, I'm going to turn it over to Molly again. And you don't get to hear from me for the rest of the meeting, which I know you're happy about. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So I'm going to do double duty tonight and fill in for Jackie. But first I'll talk to you about new business attraction. So, we always have these ebbs and flows with our project pipeline, specifically with new business attraction. And the first quarter has been a very active one. Some of you have been involved in some of those meetings and conversations with the prospects that we are working with. And, we've had everything from companies that have visited a couple of times, very interested in our community, to a very large handful of companies that are just looking for existing facilities to expand their operations. And that's one of the trends that we're seeing, is that a lot of companies are looking for existing buildings instead of looking at greenfield sites. And so That's one of the challenges that we have with the existing inventory that we have with the buildings here in Topeka and Shawnee County. A lot of times the ceiling height requirements are higher than what we have and some things like that. So we're working through those and obviously always offer up whatever we have, even if it's a little bit below what they're asking for, hoping that they will consider Topeka and Shawnee County. But we've seen a lot of activity in the first quarter. And another trend we're seeing is expansions versus relocations. So most of the projects that we're seeing are not companies that are looking at leaving the community they're in to come here. They're looking at a true expansion of their company, which is a good sign because obviously that's companies that are growing and those are the kind of companies we want to attract. And workforce is key. That's what we're hearing from everyone. That is the top of the criteria list is what is our existing pipeline for workforce, what's our plans to beef that up over the next few years, and what's the alignment with the type of skills that they're looking for their industry and what we offer in the region. So glad to have a fully staffed workforce development department at Go Topeka. We're about to hire, well, we have hired, we're about to bring on a new Cradle Through Career director, and so she will start with us at the end of the month. And so that'll really round out the services of getting our talent pipeline ramped up from the early stages on up through entering the workforce. Looking ahead, we are hosting in conjunction with the Kansas Department of Commerce a group of about 10 to 12 international site consultants, and so they'll be coming in June and spend a day and a half here and visit some of the food manufacturing facilities that we have and just look at Topeka. So putting ourselves in front of international prospects is still one of the pieces of our marketing strategy, and so that will help us in those efforts. And then the same goes with Kansas City brokers. You know, I think sometimes we forget that we're just, an hour away from Kansas City, so we think they should know what we've got going on here. But I think reminding them that we are just an hour from Kansas City and that when they have prospects that are looking at the Kansas City region to really think of Topeka and Shawnee County as part of that region. So we'll be bringing over a group of those folks as well to talk about the land and buildings and assets that we have here. And then, as always, at this time of the year, this is the time of the year where I get out on the road and start to do those face-to-face outbound marketing efforts to get in front of site selectors to talk to them one-on-one about what we have to offer here. Now let's switch gears to business retention and expansion. As Matt said, Jackie is coming back. I know you haven't seen her in a couple of these meetings, but she will be here. She's enjoying the last few weeks of time at home with her little one, but she'll be here after Memorial Day. And as you've seen with all of the reports, existing business is booming. This is a record number. We've never had, now I think in your quarterly report we had 16 projects. We have 17 active projects when you count Project Marble that you all approved incentives for this evening. So 17 active existing business projects is a really great sign that our economy here is doing great and that companies are feeling confident about your leadership and the community as a whole. So. And one of the things that's on Jackie's list when she gets back is headquarters visits. So we've got a lot of companies that have headquarters elsewhere, and it's really important to not only have a relationship with the local representatives, but to reach on up to those headquarters contacts just to make sure that they understand what resources we have available here. Because sometimes there's projects that the local representatives don't know about, and so we want to make sure we've got a strong relationship with the headquarters as well. I think that covers it really. Actually, one more thing. So back to the kind of performance standards and performance-based incentives, one of the other things that we're looking at is kind of an internal review of the incentive offerings that we have. So you all are pretty used to what the incentive guidelines are. And I think we have a robust offering for new business attraction. But per Momentum 2022, actually, in our economic development work group, we're taking a deep dive look at the incentive offerings for our existing businesses and seeing how we can be creative to really build up the community and look at where their pain points are and maybe take a different look at incentives and bring some new ideas to you all.
Molly, when we talk about the active projects that we have, 17 that you're working on with JEDO in this last quarter, how does that stack up against other communities, Douglas County, Junction City, Riley County, Manhattan? Is this something that's a regional boom, or is this more just that we've got the right thing right here?
You know, honestly, I can't say that I know what their existing business pipeline is in our neighboring communities. That's probably something I can ask, but just a gut feeling is I think we're quite a bit higher than their pipeline, just from anecdotal conversations with my peers and hearing what their pipelines are looking like. They are seeing an uptick in new business attraction, but most of their references to their project pipeline are much smaller numbers, and they're usually in the single digits for both sides actually, and probably in the low kind of teens for their total pipeline. So, but I can ask that and get back to you.
I just want to know if it's good news for Shawnee County or good news for the state of Kansas.
Sure. Anything else?
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'm really excited to be before you tonight to tell you a little bit about what's going on in small business. We have a team of 3 women, and they are knocking it out of the park. We're really excited about it. What you'll hear tonight is where we are, how we're performing, and to go into a little detail about what we have planned for the future. So to start off, you all know a little bit about the incentive program. That program is really one of the hottest things going, and it's assisting so many businesses. Right now, we're at $98,000 that we've contributed to the economy, that we've given back to small businesses for performing, for creating jobs, for doing those things that they do on a daily basis. So we're really, really excited about that. We have about we had $300,000 at the beginning of the year. And so what we'll see is that trickle down to a little bit of nothing. So we might be coming back to you, asking you for more for that program before the year ends. So we're really excited. Our pipeline remains at a steady 25 to 35 businesses in that pipeline. So yeah, the word is getting out. So many people are hearing about it, and we just want to make sure that we keep something like this in our community. The next thing that I'm working on is called economic gardening. A lot of individuals, communities have an economic gardening program. And so last month we went to, Karen and I attended a conference that talked a little bit about economic gardening, and I think it will work in our community. So we're going to do a pilot program. I've been talking to the state of Topeka, the state of Kansas, looking at economic gardening for our community, and we're going to look at it. And what that does is that it takes a look at the existing businesses in the community and looks at how we can grow from within. A lot of times we try to do some magical things to make these businesses grow, but these businesses can grow from within, and we're looking at how we can build that in our community. We are also launching a Buy Local campaign. You all hear me talk a little bit about this doing Small Business Saturday, but guess what? We're going to do it the whole year round. Okay, so it won't just be once a month or one time a year. It'll be the entire year. Small business, as I told you before, for every $100 you spend, $68 go back into the local economy. When you're dealing with a national company, for every $100 you spend, $48 goes back in the economy. Now, which one do you like best? Small business here locally. Small businesses in your community allow you to create jobs from it within as well. You create more choice, it's more personable, and you help create, grow those businesses to the size of Advisors XL or those kinds of companies. So we're excited about the Buy Local campaign. We will launch that campaign in July, so stay tuned. I'll be asking you all to come out and help us do that, help us celebrate a Buy Local campaign. We are hosting a small business summit. What we realize is that there's a lot of education that our businesses could take advantage of, and we haven't been offering that. So we'll be hosting a small business summit in September that will allow us to bring some individuals in to kind of give them some really robust education and training on how you can do business differently, how they can plan and schedule and outline their business a little bit different. So we will have some individuals, hopefully, from the Kaufman Foundation coming in. I've been talking to them, and so hopefully that will yield results. And then the Small Business Boot Camp is an expedited process of training businesses to move further, faster, more precise, and we'll be doing that. I think I told you before that I've been talking to Topeka Housing Authority and asking them, what about an incubator on the grounds of one of the public housing communities? And I think we're moving. I'm really excited about this. I think that we can at least take about 10 in a pilot program to see how it's going to work, and that we'll move forward with that. I'm excited about it. Then I want to invite everybody to the Small Business Award on the 15th of May, 12 o'clock at the Capitol Plaza. Please come. Please come and help us celebrate small businesses. There are 7 finalists for the Small Business Awards. There's 6 awards, and I'd like to see you all there. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Glenda, I'm just really excited about the Small Business Summit. I think this is something that really is needed in our community.
Yes.
The ability to interrelate and get some information. And so I look forward to the Small Business Summit in September.
Thank you.
I look forward to getting more information, but I'm also looking forward to the luncheon on the 15th.
Be there.
Yeah,
Let's go.
big a deal. Other questions for Glenda? All
Thank
right,
you so much. I appreciate you all.
Good evening. My name is Christy Dunn. I'm the PTAC Subcenter Director for attached to Go Topeka. PTAC stands for Procurement Technical Assistance Center. This is an agreement through Wichita State University. We also receive some federal funds through DLA, which is Defense Logistics Agency. So my job is to help small businesses who want to get into the federal market space go through that lengthy paperwork and process. So right now I have 168 clients in my subcenter that are active, 12 new for my fiscal year. My fiscal year began February 1 and it goes through January of 2019. Of that, I've done 85 one-on-one counseling sessions. This is just helping them go through the process. And we've already had our first event for the year. We've got some more coming up soon. The next slide. And I thought it would be helpful for you to see what kind of awards our clients have been able to achieve. These are contract awards with federal agencies. 108,000 is what we've had so far this year. Of that, 38,597 has gone to Shawnee County businesses. And then I thought it would also be helpful to see some of the breakdown. These are designators that you can have when you're bidding on federal contracts. So small disadvantaged business, women-owned small business, hub zone, or service disabled veteran-owned small business. Those are the breakdowns on that. I can't tell you specifically of those breakdowns how many are in Shawnee County, but I can tell you the breakdown overall in my area. And I would just like to let you know on May 16th, this is a good example of the relationship with the Chamber and Go Topeka and PTAC. We're having the after hours for the Chamber, and 2 of my PTAC clients are sub-sponsors for that. And they have recently won a federal grant, federal awards, not grants. So they're giving back to their community and sponsoring a good event. And it'll be out at the Air National Guard facility.
Great.
Any questions?
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be in front of you again. I'm Karen Christillis, the Executive Director of 712 Innovations, the hub of our exciting Topeka and Shawnee County entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so I wanted to give you just a few numbers on where we're at for this first quarter. So one of the exciting new things that we have started this quarter and will continue is doing an entrepreneurial meetup each quarter for entrepreneurs in Topeka and Shawnee County. So that was not just members at 712, but it was community-wide. So we're looking for ways to reach those individuals. So if you hear of anyone who did not receive an invitation to that, drop me a line and tell them to get in touch with me, because the first one was very successful. We had 35 entrepreneurs who were there. Myself and Glenda and Carl Klein from the Small Business Development Center, we were watching who was coming in the door and talking with people. And between us, there were individuals that we did not know that were in the ecosystem, or one of us knew was there. And so we were truly drawing from across the county, as well as from those who are utilizing services already, and those who are not and are exploring. So that is something we're continuing. And so mark June 9th, because that's our next quarterly entrepreneurial meetup, and you all will receive an invitation to that. Our 1 million cups is continuing, and to date we've had 40 local and regional entrepreneurs present at that. And because we have, about consistently 20 to 25 people who attend that adds up to about 300 impressions, people that we've met up to date. But that will continue to grow as we continue to grow, particularly with those meetups. And then within our pre-incubation area, this is a new word you're seeing, and Glenda referred to the INBIA conference, the International Business Innovation Association. And at that, there was a lot of talk about looking at pre-incubation programs and then incubation and accelerator programs within your community. And so our CoWork and Makerspace areas at 712, they would fall within the pre-incubation areas. And so that is they are continuing as before with programming both specifically for each of those populations. And as you know from previous reports, some of our entrepreneurs in that area cross over between the two. But the two numbers that you see, the 37 and who were in the makerspace, and then the 65 in the CoWork space, those are members who identify primarily with one or the other. So there's not a double crossover number there, even though some of that total do utilize both spaces. Some of the exciting things that are happening now that entrepreneurs that are in the area are working together and getting to know each other is within the makerspace, we have 5 women. Each of them have opened their own business. So these are 5 independent women-owned businesses. And they use the laser etcher a lot for different products that they develop. And they were talking at the makerspace, about the makerspace at the entrepreneurial meetup. And they said, look, because they use it at different, remember, we're 24/7, so they're there at different times of the day. And so they were like, I use it too. What do you do on it? And so they decided to form a women's only meetup around the laser etcher and trade their tricks and techniques that they do, because they were each admiring products that they have. And so there's great collaboration and cross collaboration which happens. So one of the things that I personally am most excited about is the true start of the 712 incubator. And so in partnership with Washburn University, Rick Lejeune and Carl Klein are co-chairing that initiative, and we are based on the MIT model, which is a mentor-based incubation program. We are going to do our first silent cohort this summer, where we do a shakedown of our mentors, our curriculum, before we announce it to the public and then enroll people in. And so next time I'm before you, I'll give you a little peek into where that's happening, and you can help us truly spread the word, and people can know how they can then sign up to get part of that program as well.
Karen, can you give me a breakdown as to, are people needing more makerspace or more co-work space?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
So basically, both areas need more square footage, to be able to do what they need to do. We need more square footage within the co-work space for things such as conference rooms and collaboration spaces, as well as our businesses, particularly now, are growing to where they could move into an office, but with only 3 offices, we don't quite have that, area for them. And then certainly, just as always, the makerspace started out in a very small space, a lot of really great tools, but a very small space. And so to really reach its full potential and allow more people to use it, because what we find are people, sometimes it's just too crowded, and so they'll come back later, that sort of thing. And so there's only so many people who can actually work on the equipment at any one given time.
When we first started the 712 Innovations, the idea was that 712 would become self-sustaining. I know there was just some significant discussion last year about whether or not 712 was self-sustaining, whether or not it was continuing, where it would need to be self-sustaining. To make our full potential, are we just really needing to look at bigger space? Are we not tapping into the full potential? Where do you see 712 going?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, the square footage that we have now, most either co-work spaces or incubator spaces just on their own are over 30,000 square feet. And that's the national industry standard for how much square footage you need to be able to break even and be self-sustaining. And with our, close to 3,000 square feet, we're way under that point. So square footage is certainly one of that. That would allow us to do a lot more things that were dynamic, such as bring in larger, for instance, guest speakers and allow programs and, different, programmatically is where it would grow, because if we had more conference rooms, we'd be able to rent those out, bring in speakers that we'd be able to charge from, because it's a diversified economic model that we would need to make the space go once we did have the space, that we need. And so getting that programming in and at the level that we would need it would be, I don't think really challenging. It would be fun, exciting time, actually, because, the audience is there, and the people out there in Topeka and Shawnee County, even little ones, want to come and grow, and we can offer those services here for them, but the audience is there.
Other questions? Yes.
Thank you. You mentioned that there were 5 women who were involved. Can you give me an idea of any more diversity or ethnicity or racial makeup of those entrepreneurs, so that I get a feel for how many people are aware of the program and taking advantage of the program?
Yeah, and in fact, I was just having some conversation at our reception ahead of time, saying that I think that there are always deeper reaches that we can do. However, right now represented within the makerspace and the co-work space, we have a population that's very reflective of the population of Topeka, in that we have Latino and Hispanic business owners and entrepreneurs who are looking at their product. We also have African American representation, as well as the full complement of what the rest of the the beautiful bucket is, as well as ages. We had an entrepreneurial meetup today that was just talking about, do you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? What do you need? And that was a cross range of millennials who appeared, as well as some 40 and 50-year-olds who were thinking about translation. So in all of those demographic areas, we really are seeing touchstones, but we always are looking for a deeper touch.
One other thing to follow up, encouraged by what Matt was saying earlier, reaching out to the people who have been leaving Payless. They may look at this as an opportunity for them to not just look for a job, but to move into something that they can control a little bit better.
Yeah, and absolutely, we've had a number of Payless employees come and take tours and want to see what's there, and we actually have 2 members who would fall into that category. People who are in transition for one reason or another, and 2 from that company who are there within the space, and they're definitely looking for something that they can steer their own boat with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, JEDO members. Forge's mission is to attract and retain young talent to the Greater Topeka area. I'm going to start off talking about some of our retention, what we're doing with that. So, as you currently see, we have 1,734 members. In the first quarter, we kind of presented how many events and meetings we've had, and then our attendance at it. We really important for engagement. For a young person, to get them engaged in the community, involved, build relationships, build friendships, that's going to retain them. That's going to get them to stay here long term. And so we really focus on that. And I just want to mention a few of our highlights for our first quarter events. My favorite was the soft opening at the Pennant. So we got to go just for an exclusive Forge event. We got to go before it actually opened and experience the food and the atmosphere. And that was a great highlight, and it's something that I know all of my friends and all the people in Forge talk about, that they're looking forward to a lot more restaurants coming downtown. Some other things, which we had LeadCon, just how to get involved professionally in the community, nonprofits, how to really kind of civically get involved. We were really pushing that. And really, the third one was a behind-the-scenes tour of the Topeka Civic Theater. So we had over 100 people come, and just kind of see what it's like to our arts and what it is in Topeka. We have so many great arts with NOTO, with downtown, and all throughout the city. So that's just a little bit of that. Now we're going to switch gears and talk about attracting. So Top City Interns, if you're not familiar with it, it is a internship program where we bring all the interns that are in the greater Topeka area together, and we show them what it's like to live, work, and play as a young person. And our goal is to retain them as young professionals and young talents in our community. So last year we had 191. We're currently getting the sign-ups in. We're already over 70. We're expecting around 200 to 225, depending on how they all sign up. And we're very excited for this year. We're kind of tweaking a few things. We got feedback from the interns on saying what they liked and what they wanted to see more of in Topeka. And so we're going to listen to them, and we're going to really showcase our city. So we're really excited about that. And I'm really excited that we're getting initial feedback on the results from the offers that they made on interns that graduated, and they were hired. There's only a few companies that have reported them to me right now, but I will next quarter at our meeting, I'll give those numbers to you of how many offers were made and how many accepted offers in Topeka that participate in this program. So with that, I will stand for any questions.
Where are you advertising for the Top City Interns? Where do students find out about this?
We're actually getting ready to do a press release to really get out to the Capital Journal, all the KSNT, WIBW, really through all the media, social media.
Okay.
So.
And is this geared towards mainly college students, high school students? What are you looking for?
Great question. It's really geared to college students, but also we have master's students. We had actually, I think we had 1 or 2 doctorate students that are in it. It's really just anyone that's going to school that's here. This is really just their first impressions. I believe first impressions are everything, and we roll out the red carpet and really show them what to do in Topeka. We take them down the first Friday down in Noto. We have a downtown concert in Topeka. We send a list of all the great places to eat around town and all the events going on. So, and we also have some special lunch and learns with some CEOs and some community members come and just share their experience of why they're in Topeka. So that's kind of just a broad overview of the program.
Great. Any other questions, Councilman Jensen?
For the intern program, what do you need to scale that regionally and then nationally?
That's a great question. I would
I
say
appreciate advertising to the students and folks that are around here, but we need to import people, and that's going to require a broader reach. And an intern program is an incredible opportunity to invite young professionals that aren't already in our community to come and see our community and then hopefully want to stay. Unfortunately, it requires, regional, national advertising and that sort of thing. Is there a plan to do that?
Yeah, so right now we really kind of lean on the businesses and organizations to really, they go out and they recruit the interns and then they participate with that. So we're actually not out there going and placing interns with companies. They do that, the ones they hire, then they're part of our program.
Well, not so much placement, but just advertising that we have a robust intern program in our community and that there are intern opportunities here.
Yeah.
Or is that not?
The next really conversation we're really talking about is getting companies that don't currently have an internship program and really helping them develop them so then they could bring on more interns. Because that's one of the things I know some this year is there are some companies or young people that are looking for spots in Topeka for it, and I've been asking around, we send them out to our list and stuff. So that's a really good point, Councilman Jensen. That's something we'll keep in touch.
I know that in our discussion, it's always disheartening to hear, I came to school at Washburn, I want to stay in Topeka, but I can't find a job here. I'm going to go where the job is. If we can hook young people up with the companies, that maybe they will be more inclined to stay or easier to stay. So
Absolutely.
that's what I like to
In
see.
my opinion, I think there's more than enough jobs available. It's all about selling them on the quality place, selling them on Topeka. I talk to a lot of companies and stuff, and everyone's looking for quality workers or just workers in general. So it's not really that there's not jobs. It's just really we need to get the people to want to come to Topeka. And that's what Forge are working on every day.
Great. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Good evening. I wanted to talk with you a little bit more about workforce and education. That's a wonderful transition in. You've got a lot of the data on the screen, but there's a couple different things that I want to showcase for you. And first of all, you hear a lot of data. You hear a lot of numbers. We report on a lot of things. I want to bring it really local really quickly, and I want to share with you specifically about those CARE bus passes that you see up there on the screen in terms of that program. That's for the Topeka Rescue Mission. That's their career readiness program. And from that, one of the things that they have talked about and they've shared, and this is really a thank you to you, They share that your support of the mission's career readiness education program called CARE provides, working with the Topeka Metro to those bus passes, the assistance that their students would not have the transportation to their internships or their employment opportunities otherwise. That's really what drives that. They provide those bus passes so that they can get to those internships and those employment opportunities. You continue to make a difference with those dollars. You've continued to provide them the opportunity to get those students placed. And I don't know if you saw this about a week ago, but this is a partnership thing. When we talk about partnership within the community, we're all partners in this entire process. The Recycled Rides program that Washburn Tech does, and they recycle those rides. One of those recipients is a City of Topeka employee, but she was originally in this CARE program. She used those bus passes to get to her internship, to ultimately then get a full-time job. And she now has that recycled ride to be able to get her to that City of Topeka position. So she was homeless, and she has gone through this entire process. And that's one of those things that brings everyone together. JEDO's been a player. The City of Topeka has been a player. Washburn Tech has been a player. You know, we've all been a player in terms of being able to assist that woman to get her job, get her transportation, and be able to maintain that position and be to work on time. So I wanted to share that with you, and that's more of a very individualized thing than all the numbers that you see. That's her name is Jordan. I believe the mayor is kind of recognizing what we're talking about. There was an article 8 days ago, so you would be able to refer to that if you wanted to look at that. The other thing that I wanted to share with you too, we have huge numbers happening with the South Topeka Ride to Work program. That's a pilot program that you approved back the end of last year. Up on the screen, it tells you that 1,820 rides to date. Well, of course, that was March numbers because that's quarterly. So it was through March. I got this report today. It's not even color yet. 2,647 trips today. So you are making a difference in a greater stream of things like we talked about with the CARE bus passes. You're making that difference in terms of the SOTO Ride to Work program. Many of those positions, over 33% of those trips are taken between 5 and 9 a.m. So that gives us the opportunity for Topeka Metro to know in terms of how they need to adjust things so people can get to those jobs in South Topeka. And then another 37% that, of course, right now there's not that bus transportation, are happening between 2 and 7 p.m. So the majority of those rides are being taken, you know, at a time that gives them the opportunity to be able to see what's needed out there. And all of our employers are taking advantage of that. And of course, something long-term that you've been providing for multiple years is those JEDO scholarships to the Washburn Tech students in the career technical education programs. This semester alone, so the spring semester, there were 53 students that were impacted by those scholarships and over $23,000 in scholarships awarded. So that's what I wanted to share with you, bring it a little bit more local than just numbers, and kind of just a great big thank you in terms of our workforce and education and all the different things that we're doing. So great job. Yes, thank you. Got into my thing. And that is the other thing. We've, of course, been challenged all along with working how we can be able to support those impacted payless employees as much as possible. Just while I was waiting, while Gabe was talking with you a moment ago, I got 2 additional emails from impacted payless employees. We are working with them really on a localized level. I'm actually just collecting those resumes. I'm going to get them back out to our HR and recruitment managers so that we can share and be able to really grassroots be able to share that information and be able to help them as much as we can in terms of placement. So I think I've had 15 emails just since yesterday since we put that charge out there. So they want to stay here. They love Topeka, they love the community and Shawnee County and what we're growing here, and they want to continue to be a part of it.
Great.
Thank you.
Questions for Barbara? All right. Thank you very much.
Good evening. If you haven't picked up on it yet, we have a busy office.
Yeah.
Last time I chatted with you, we talked a little bit about metrics. I had indicated to you that our implementation committee had just approved a set of metrics. That set of metrics is now published. It's available in the amazing Go Topeka quarterly report that our great marketing team put together for us. The metrics scorecard is a It's kind of become a passion project of ours. It's been a great example of a truly collaborative effort with our community. It has been not only the implementation committee that has worked on this, but it's been all of the Momentum 2022 work groups. It's been the metrics task force. It's been various community experts that we've reached out to for one reason or another. So we're pretty proud of that. So please take some time to look at that and provide any additional thoughts or feedback that you might have. One thing that will be coming in the future as well is sort of a deep dive of that scorecard. One thing that you'll notice is that the scorecard itself is divided into each one of the strategic initiatives for Momentum 2022. So what we aim to have in the future is lots of supplemental information that tells the bigger picture of the story, the additional metrics that didn't fit on that one sheet. So we're pretty excited about that. I'm going to give you a brief update of all of the work groups as well. So to start off with talent development. So the talent development work group, they have actually broken into several different subcommittees to really sort of enhance their ability to work on multiple things at one time. So the Workforce Inventory Committee and the Kindergarten Readiness Committee are really actively creating an inventory of available community resources and creating plans for making that information available via the website and any other means appropriate as well. The Quality of Place work group, they are working on an educational marketing campaign that will really start to highlight the importance of public-private partnerships as well as some of the incentives that we're able to offer. And you will start to see some of that collateral coming to life in June as well. The Downtown and NODO work group, they're really working to evaluate and determine if a downtown and NODO master plan or market study would be an effective and usable tool for this committee or for this community and be able to move forward with that. The Entrepreneurship work group, they're working on Global Entrepreneurship Week as well as Startup Grind and getting those programs activated in our community. Economic Development work group. They're working most actively on discussions surrounding quality of place and how that fits in with economic development. They actually hosted and facilitated a conversation where they brought in the Quality of Place work group to have that conversation with respect to what criteria would we provide to the subcommittee of JEDO who's working on quality of place to really recommend as far as how to fund quality of place criteria with economic development dollars. The marketing work group is developing a Momentum 2022 Speakers Bureau to spread the message not only about Momentum 2022, but also really about those positive developments within our community. Actually, that Speakers Bureau since January 1 has formally presented Momentum 2022 to about 750 community members. And then the last work group that we have is Community Engagement, Pride, and Service. So that work group is really focused on collaboration without duplication. And they're working on several projects right now. Some of them include collaborating with Shawnee County Parks and Rec as well as Arts Connect to involve the Highcrest neighborhood in painting a mural on a new basketball court at Betty Phillips Park. They're also working to build awareness of an app that was actually developed by Topeka High students to help provide information as to available resources in the community with respect to food resources or mental health resources. So we're really excited about being able to help promote that. Also, they're partnering with the city to engage volunteers for the city's Team Up to Cleanup effort. And then we also have the East Topeka Council within Momentum 2022. So they've sort of split their focus into three different areas. So their three focus areas are code compliance, crime, and infrastructure. So the Code Compliance Committee, they're just really appreciative of recent efforts to be tougher on code violations. And they actually want to pursue mapping those current code violations to kind of determine hot spots and then also sort of repeat offenders, if you will. With respect to crime, Chief Cochran has actually put 2 police officers onto that committee. So they're able to kind of address some of those questions and concerns on the spot, which has been really helpful to their cause as well. And they're also discussing how to best implement direct contact with citizens through sort of a door-to-door outreach program.
And then with respect to infrastructure, they're just always continuing to look at ways to identify support for East Topeka infrastructure. With that, I'll stand for any questions you may have.
Just, I really want to thank all the groups that are doing all the hard work. There is a lot of hard work that's being done. You'll see in just a little bit when we get into the quality of place discussion, there's a lot of influence from your committee that spilled over into the resolution. So thank you for that. Like I said, the greatest form of is plagiarism, and so there was a little bit of that influence that did spill over. I'm very intrigued about the collaboration without duplication. I think that's one of the things that we see in our community is a lot of good groups that are doing very similar things, but finding unique in groups that they can do. Yep. Other questions for Molly or for Kayla? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, this
Ask who she is.
This is
Introduce herself.
sure.
I'm sorry. My name is Kayla Bittler, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Momentum 2022.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to a conclusion of item number 6, the quarterly report for Topeka. Our next item.
Item 7, discussion with possible action, quality of place and economic development.
This was an item that did come up at the last Topeka board meeting, or JEDO meeting. There was a subcommittee that was formed of Councilmember Lesser, Mayor Della Isla, and myself, with the assistance of the Topeka staff, and as mentioned, the Momentum 2022 subcommittee on quality of place, and the assistance of our county councilor, Jim Crowell. There is a resolution, a proposed resolution within your packet, and this is be presented for your consideration, discussion, if we want to ultimately take action on it. I know that there are some members signed up to speak on it if we get to that point of possible action. So at this point, Jim, I'm going to turn it kind of over to you as to how we got to this point or looking at this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jim Crowell, Shawnee County Councilor. Yeah, this draft is the result of the work of the committee, and the members of the subcommittee with Momentum 22 will recognize, I'm sure, paragraph 4 and the criteria in that that were established in that. I went out in drafting the resolution to try to just read a lot of information. There's a lot of information out there on this subject. I couldn't find one scholarly article or one community that had a draft resolution that I thought fit with what I heard our JEDO members and our community members speaking about. So I kind of picked pieces of different things that I read and put those into the draft. So you'll see paragraph 1 is a definition. That was one of the more succinct definitions that I found that I thought would be appropriate for a draft, and this is a draft. Number 2 just contains a listing of various characteristics you will find in a quality of place resolution. Paragraph 3 establishes the fund. There's a lot of open questions with regard to that, but it simply is a paragraph that establishes the fund. Paragraph 4 lists the criteria. A lot of the work was done from that subcommittee. Our subcommittee of JEDO also made some changes in this criteria. Also added an exclusion to make it clear that this is for places and not for community organizations to seek funds for special events. And then paragraph 5 is a procedural paragraph outlining a proposed process for how a quality of place project would be vetted and then brought before JEDO for consideration, along with a requirement that it be an actual agenda item that's noticed up to give JEDO members and the community an opportunity to comment before a project could be selected for funding.
I know that Councilmember Hiller was not able to attend tonight, but she did send communication specifically on that last item as to what was meant by the word public vote. And I I know that our intent was that a vote that is made in public by this group and not by the staff of Topeka making a decision as to what quality of place is. While they may make recommendations, ultimately the vote is made by this board, so, or a public vote.
Right. It could also be interpreted to mean, a special question election or something like that.
Okay. Are there other discussions? I guess at this point, we move to discussion of the resolution. Councilman Jensen.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, I mean, I don't see anything in there that I have any real concern over, but with the members of the committee, do you have just some ideas what your type of facilities you were thinking through as you crafted this language?
I can tell you specifically what I was looking at was when we talk about quality of place, based on our discussion at the last JEDO meeting, involving all of the JEDO members and the members of the public, was what distinguishes Topeka from other communities? What makes us unique? Whether it's a cultural, whether it's an artistic, whether it's a civic, but something that would make Topeka and Shawnee County distinct and unique from other communities.
So not just a park per se, but one specific to our community that's not replicated anywhere else.
And that's really where we got to in the discussion, is distinguishing quality of life from quality of place. Because those are two different
Agreed.
things. Other members of the committee? All right.
Okay.
Other discussions? At this point, is there a motion to adopt the resolution? There's been a motion to adopt the resolution by Mayor Della Isla. Is there a second? There's a second by Councilmember Padilla. Before we move forward, at this point, is any other discussion? Commissioner Archer.
Yes, Commissioner. I cannot support this. I think quality of place is critically important to our community, but the voters didn't give JEDO clear authority to spend sales tax dollars on quality of life. And I'll go to the resolution that was passed for the sales tax that addresses economic development. It says, whereas the previous countywide sales tax provided economic development success with the addition of Topeka Mars Plant, Home Depot Distribution Center, Topeka Target Distribution Center, Bimbo Bakery USA Factory, and many others, too numerous to mention, in the Topeka and Shawnee County economy. That was the rationale for economic development on the ballot that was passed. In my opinion, the voters did not vote for a downtown plaza. They didn't vote for the Jayhawk Theater. They didn't vote for the Riverfront Authority or any other political project, and that's what those are. They're political projects. So I can't support this, and in my humble opinion, this is a betrayal of the voters, and it may seriously jeopardize future initiatives to generate sales tax. Thank you, Commissioner.
I'll respond first, but then Mayor Della Isla. I appreciate that Commissioner Archer, in your remarks, but I think that we also have to look at, in the interlocal agreement, one of the very first parts of the interlocal agreement is that this board is the one that defines what that economic development is.
That was not passed by the voters, that was passed by the politicians.
But we are responsible to the voters. But Mayor Della Isla?
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And that's what I was going to outline. When I was taking a look at our operating agreement, it does state that we as a body have the opportunity then to set the goals annually with this body with regards to what economic development is. Furthermore, we paid a substantial amount of money when we had a consultant come and tell us about the things that we needed to focus on in our community, which has given birth to the Momentum 2022 plan, which is the plan that we have all as a community adopted on what we're going to do. And if you take a look at what our whole community has requested, we had 2,300 and something people in our community talk and make votes. One of them was to create a vibrant and attractive place. That is economic development, is part of our strategic plan. We have been talking about it in Momentum 2022, and I'm going to fully support this. I feel that it's under our responsibility to ensure that we are doing everything that we can to grow our economic development in our community.
Might just also add, Commissioner Archer, again, respectfully, in the ballot, it did not have any discussion about the rides to employers.
That's correct.
It did not have anything about a top city intern project. It did not have anything about 712 innovations, about small business development, about PTAC, about a EMBD, about small business summits, about the number of workforce projects that we may have, all of the things that we just spent the last 40 minutes going over. None of that, or very little of that, was actually within the ballot question. But all of that was deemed to be a priority by JEDO as economic development. And so I guess the question becomes, is quality of place a priority for JEDO for economic development? And that's ultimately where we're going tonight with the resolution, but also in the future as we look at any project that may come before this board, whether or not it has the merits to pass beyond this resolution as quality of place. Many projects won't have the merits to fit within this resolution. Any other discussion? Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Archer, I appreciate your comments. This language is written intentionally vague in order to give it flexibility. However, with flexible language also has a slippery slope. This, because it's written intentionally vague, could be applied to a vast number of projects that it would not be appropriate to use for. And that's part of the reason why I asked if you guys had some examples of what you were thinking of when it was crafted. So I appreciate your comments because you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, we have a responsibility to use this money appropriately. And I do feel that there are some narrow instances where it is appropriate to use sales tax money to spur quality of life and quality of place, because that is a huge part of attracting my generation for economic development. It does no good to bring jobs to this town if we have no employees. And we absolutely must do quality of place and quality of life to get employees. That said, I believe this body should exercise caution when approving programs under this because it's very specific. I mean, we can't use this to fund things that folks can't get to. So, you know, a private country club, probably not. You know, a public park that's open to everyone, you know, that's a whole different matter. But there are some constraints in here. It's written vague in order to give it flexibility. I will support it, but I want to encourage the body to exercise caution when reviewing these projects, because this is one of those things that can get absolutely out of hand rapidly. And you're correct, and the voters have entrusted us to get this sales tax money for a certain period of time. And if we screw this up, they're not going to give it back to us. And then that is an incredible blow to this community. So I will cautiously support this, and I would look forward to seeing some projects come down the pipeline for it. I would encourage folks that are applying to make sure you cross every T and dot every I, because we have got to execute this perfectly every time, or we're going to blow a hole in the whole thing, and that's going to be bad. Thank you.
And I've had numerous leaders in our community, businessmen that are still trying to figure out what is quality of life and what is quality of place in our community. And with those doubts in using sales tax dollars, I express those doubts.
Mayor Del-Isla.
I think that that's the beauty of democratic government, the fact that we're all able to have a conversation And very importantly, to hear those concerns that Commissioner Archer is bringing, so that as we are making these decisions, we keep those things in mind so that we do a better job educating our constituency. And so that as we are making those decisions, answering to some of the questions of my colleague, Deputy Mayor here, that this is not just going to be something that somebody can apply for. It would have to come back to the body. And the whole body, and a majority of the body, would have to state that, yes, that we are in agreement. One of the things that we were talking about as well was ensuring that also we could have whoever we're contracting with, in this case, of course, is Topeka, ensure that this also fits the criteria and it marries with everything that we're trying to accomplish in our community, to avoid what you're saying, somebody saying, hey, this is an event or a location that we want to create. It's not going to be as loose as it may seem. But I do appreciate all the comments and absolutely love the diversity of thought that is being represented here tonight.
Any other discussion? Before we take a vote, there are 3 people that are signed up to speak on this item.
The first is Joseph Ledbetter, followed by Clark Trammell, followed by Carol Marple.
Evening, governing body. I support the resolution, and I do serve as co-chair of this Quality Place with Momentum 2022. But to address one of Mr. Archer's concerns, years ago, and not that far in the past, I asked specifically for a definition of economic development. That was not defined in the resolution that was passed. So even though there's a lot of whereases, I can understand Mr. Archer's interpretation of that. But the definition is simply not there. Economic development is what we, JEDO, defines it to be. Like it or not, that's what we got. I've always believed, even before I got on this Parks and Rec Advisory Council, that Parks and Rec was definitely economic development. Just go look at the face of kids playing in these parks. I mean, that is pure future and economic development. And it keeps families here. It keeps young people here that might otherwise leave if they have good places to take their kids. They're working hard here. They like to take their kids to local parks, Lake Shawnee, Gage, but also these wonderful little community parks we've got. And I didn't come up here to talk about Parks and Rec. I want to talk about place. I got sidetracked, sorry. I believe that these definitions are what we worked on in our committee, and what's laid out in this resolution absolutely came out of our work as well as the work of other people. And I just want to say I do support this, but I also understand the concerns about the lack of a definition of economic development, but I think we defined it with our work and our contractor and all the progressive documents that we've passed and funded. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good evening. Clark Trammell. Nice to see you all again. I wanted to start off with a couple of things, and I want to hit on some specific points. One, I know you all can see me. Congratulations and my compliments. An extremely bright group of people have come up here and made presentations, and it's nice to see that brain trust come together. So thank you. I also want to say I'm disappointed that we don't have a full board here. And I think it's important, whether you're voting or not voting, that there is a board comprised of the city council and the county commission that should be here as part of their job duties. Some have excuses. I don't know what they are, but we need everybody and all the brains here at the same time. And I hope they hear that, and I'm saying that as a businessman. Get on to this subject. I'm confused as to why you're even having this motion. As a business person, you all have the authority to do this without this motion. You're going to make a motion, and I'm one of the few times Councilman Archer, or Commissioner Archer, and I will agree, or have agreed, is I don't think you should approve this. I don't think it's necessary. If you want to do something like this, what you do is you redefine what economic development is. And you include it in your definition as to what the mission is of JEDO and Go Topeka. If you're going to write and create this document, then you also need to do it for quality of life. Because quality of place and quality of life, you mentioned that, are two different things, but yet they're each specific, believe it or not, and defined, and they overlap with each other. They run concurrently with each other in different ways. Society today and for years, and the millennials can appreciate this, is people go where they want to live first, and then they find a job. It's not like my generation and those behind me, and Mr. Archer's generation, et cetera, where we got the job and then we moved. We move now where we want to be. So quality of place is important. And so is quality of life as we use quality of place. So if you're going to define and run a motion to create quality of place, then you need to do the same thing for quality of life. Quality of life is the general well-being of individuals and societies, outlining negative, positive features of life. It observes satisfaction, including everything from physical health, family, education, employment, wealth, religious beliefs, finance, and environment. Quality of place is comprised of three dimensions: what's there, who's there, and what's going on. Those are two distinct things. Two different things that you need to be sensitive to. We're talking about quality of place, but I don't think the community knows really what that is. I think they're thinking it's quality of life. When we talk about quality of life, people won't understand, is it quality of place? Be very clear on what we mean by the definitions and terms we're using, because it's the community you represent that's going to have to live with this and appreciate you and support you. If we don't understand it, then you're going to break down in your dialogue between you and us and you and us collectively. I think you need to redefine economic development. I think it's a whole different definition than what we're using. It includes other things such as Camp Daisy, Heartland Park, the Plaza, Jayhawk Theater, Visit Topeka. And I know Mr. Archer made a comment about that, and I totally disagree. I don't think those are political. I think those are quality of place items that create quality of life. I have been involved with the Jayhawk Theater. Mr. Jensen, you sit on that board. My wife sits on that board. What an incredible economic development machine. It's right up there with the Plaza. That isn't political. That's something that's going to attract people to want to live here, to want to move here. Is that it? Am I done? Thank you.
Thank you.
I should have given him some of my time. I'm Carol Marple. I want to just say I respect these gentlemen a lot, and they said it much better than I could ever say it. The comment that I want to make is I don't think we have any kind of economic development when we leave the money sit. You know, money sitting in the bank, the economic development money, doesn't do anyone any good. It doesn't create jobs. Nothing happens. It just sits in the bank. And that's not why we pass the sales tax. So I want to say that. I also say that I do believe we need to quit giving lip service to, we talk a lot about quality of life and quality of place, but I don't see a lot of inroads being made to improve any of it. But it does make good conversation. So that's what I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This time, if we could call a roll call vote on this resolution.
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Archer?
No.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Padilla?
Yes.
Councilmember Lesser?
Yes.
And it would show that it passed.
Yes.
Our next item.
Item 8, discussion, East Topeka Learning Center, Washburn Tech East. A, construction project update. B, new markets tax credits update.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Lalo Munoz. I serve as Chair of the East Topeka Learning Center project, also known as Washburn Tech East. I'll give you a brief update of the project as well. After me, Jeff White will give you an update on the new market tax credits. As you know, March 15th was a groundbreaking of this project. A incredible amount of individuals who showed up that day. Since that day, construction has begun on working on demolition, asbestos project, as well as windows. A number of individuals have commented about just how fast it seems that work is progressing on this project. So there's an incredible amount of buzz among residents who live in that area. Expenditures, you can see a breakdown of those expenditures in your packet. You'll see that $867,518 have been spent thus far to date. So as the construction has begun, the focus now turns to working to build support in the community. And that's where I think that I can bring my experience together with Pastor Marcus Clark, who will begin to work to engage and establish relationships with individuals who haven't been reached out to yet, to try and get to know individuals, groups, churches in East Topeka, as well as reestablish and strengthen relationships we already have through our networks over the course of the years in East Topeka. So we'll be beginning to work with our task force to begin to figure out how we can work to build a broad support for this project. And it doesn't come with some challenges. We know because of the survey and market study that costs and issues along those lines are things that will be some challenges for individuals who will potentially be enrolled in the East Topeka Washburn Tech East programs. And so working with Washburn Tech, we'll be trying to address those issues. And we also know there's a fair amount of skepticism, well, whether this will actually take off. But we know it will. I think that the phrase "seeing is believing" is something that is very apt here. For many individuals who live in this area, they've not seen anything change for a very long time. But over the course of the next months, as Washburn Tech East opens, they will begin to see for themselves the fact that things are, in fact, changing, and that distrust and the skepticism will begin to transform into optimism and belief of change here in East Topeka. So if there are not any questions, I'll turn it over to Jeff White. Go ahead.
Councilman Lesser.
Is Mr. White going to speak about the tax credits?
He will be.
Okay, because my agenda said construction project update. So can you give me an update on the construction portion of it, how we're progressing along, any roadblocks we've hit, are we on time, all those different?
Everything is progressing on time. I believe right now, as far as if you want to talk about progression in terms of 0 to 100, we're at 3%. Things are where we believe they should be right now. So, and up to this point, we've not had any problems unexpected that we've run into thus far. So if you've driven by it, I don't know if anyone's seen, you can see into it, and so the windows and everything, there's been demolition of a building that was scheduled for demolition, and so things are going well so far.
Has the abatement process taken place as far as
that
the
has?
asbestos? And did we find what we expected to find?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's anybody. You want to speak to that?
Yes, we did for the most part. Most of the construction project update is actually in your packet already, so that document is in writing. So you have that for reference, and we're happy to go over it. One thing that's just come up today, and it's just some fill work that we're looking at. There was some sand versus traditional fill that would be able to go back in, where there's going to be that extension of, if the photograph comes up, that new entryway that's going to be the partial that would be new construction. There's going to be have to be some additional dirt because there wasn't the appropriate, if you see kind of that wrap around in the front of the building that's up on the screen. But everything else, there's nothing that has been a major concern or anything like that. It's moving.
Change orders pending?
I know there have been change
Nothing
orders.
of any
but
magnitude?
nothing of magnitude, correct.
I might let our county councilor weigh in on the change order since we've been overseeing the project by the county commission.
Jim Crouch, Shawnee County Council. Yes, we did have a small change order. I believe it was in the neighborhood of $2,500 for some additional asbestos abatement that was discovered in a certain area, and that's what we've had so
Pretty
far.
nominal. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you.
Anything, I was just going to comment, if you do drive by, you can see change happening right now.
Absolutely.
So, all right, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Councilman
Just one
Padilla.
question. Thank you for the update, Barbara. You mentioned a little bit about the neighborhood and how they're responding to, I guess, the changes that are out there. Is there a specific effort to contact the neighborhood around there and just kind of let them know, even rather than waiting for them to come and ask the questions about what's happening, what's the timeline, for us to continually keep them informed about the progress?
Yeah, one of the things that Washington Tech is working on is creating a couple of groups, one around the idea of businesses, and the second is around the idea of churches and working with faith organizations. We will be working on opportunities to be able to engage, because we know that we're working with East Topeka, a group of individuals whose find it maybe more difficult perhaps to engage themselves in find out what's going on. We're going to work to try and make sure that we are creating opportunities that works within their schedule to be able to help educate those residents and neighborhoods about what's going on and make sure that we're communicating as best as possible.
Okay, thank you. I like that you're adapting to their schedules rather than making up a time schedule that then they have to try to make. Sure. But, yeah, thank you very much, Lonnie.
Any other questions? If not, I'll have Jeff White come up and talk about new market tax credits.
I think we're ready for Jeff and the thrilling topic of tax credits.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. Jeff White with Columbia Capital to talk about your favorite topic, new markets tax credits. I do have a little bit of a status update coming around for you tonight. I'll go through it relatively quickly, but certainly happy to linger on any topics that you'd like to spend more time on. So since the last time we chatted about the project, I think actually the last time we chatted, we had a commitment for allocation from Raza Development Fund out of Phoenix. Since that time, we do have a commitment to invest, so a tax credit investor to buy the tax credits that will be generated by the project. It's PNC Bank out of Pittsburgh. They're a pretty active player in the new market space nationally and have been quite aggressive with their tax credit pricing along the way. So we're happy to have them on board. They have worked on a number of projects with Raza Development Fund. In fact, I think they were closing a project in another community this week. So we expect them to kind of work together and understand how each of them works, and their attorneys have worked together as well. There are lots of kind of moving parts in these transactions, as you saw from the last time we talked, and everybody has a lawyer. All those lawyers are on board, which is very important to us because we have kind of a unique structure. We have a relatively simple project by new market standards, but a little bit of a unique structure given JEDO, Go Topeka, so on and so forth. All those folks are now on board, and we've spent really the last 3 or 4 weeks in small group and one-on-one conversations to get folks comfortable with the structure, have them come up to speed on what this JEDO thing is and who Go Topeka is and how they interrelate and those kinds of things. We actually will kick off our documentation process with a group call on Friday. We will probably have documentation calls every Friday through the end of June, and our timing to close, we're still targeting the end of June. I'll note there while we're talking about calendar that we would expect to be asking this board to meet in a special meeting in June to approve the transaction. Among other things, we would expect at that point to ask JEDO to convey the property to the New Markets borrower, which is a newly created Kansas nonprofit, to authorize execution of a leverage loan, which is basically taking the sales tax dollars that you've set aside for the project and putting them through the structure. And then we've got a little bit of a change in how the agreement with Washburn, which was going to be a 3-party lease, it's actually now going to be a 2-party contract for service in order to comport with the new markets regs. So we'll figure out exactly what we're going to do, but we may either transfer or have you kind of cancel the lease, and then the new markets borrower will enter into a contract for service. And we're working actively with Washburn to kind of move that contract from a lease to a from a lease to a contract for service. A little bit of details in the middle on structure. I won't go into those unless you've got specific questions, so I'll kind of cut to the chase. As of right now, I would expect the anticipated net benefit from the New Markets transaction to the project to be about $1.25 million, which means $1.25 million in sales taxes generated locally will not have to be spent on this project and can go for other economic development purposes, however you're defining those into the future. I will say that there has already been a lot of kind of informal work done to line things up. The documentation process is pretty intense. The closing of these New Markets deals is an interesting mix of real estate, tax, legal, and finance documents. And typically there's about 125 documents on the closing table at the end of the deal. So there's a lot of things to pull together. Some of them are pretty easy. Some of them take quite a bit of negotiation, but that's the phase of the process that we're moving into. So, Mr. Chair, happy to try and address any questions from the group.
I know that you said we could probably skip over the anticipated structure, but can you walk through the anticipated
sure.
structure
Absolutely.
for me? When we go through this, currently the project is owned by Topeka. The county commission is overseeing the execution of the construction. How is that going to change with the new market tax credits?
So the project itself will be owned by a new entity, a new Kansas nonprofit that's being created specifically for New Markets purposes, and that's very common in the structure. The compliance piece of this New Markets deal is actually relatively easy to manage for a real estate deal. One of the key rules is you can't pick up the building and move it to a non-qualified census tract. But the New Markets investor likes to see a clean entity own that property during the New Markets compliance period. So we'll have a new nonprofit that will own the project, contract for services from Washburn to actually operate the project, and that'll be its sole function. So we would anticipate that JEDO would convey the property, including the building and the work in progress, to the New Markets borrower, and then we'll reimburse expenses already made toward that project from those New Markets proceeds. So there's a little bit of a kind of a circle flow of funds on the day of closing from that standpoint. We've talked it through with the parties, and we anticipate that the county would continue to be the manager of the construction contract. There's some state law purposes for that, but it's also easier just kind of leave it the way it is. We'd probably have a collateral assignment of that contract, which is typical in any lending situation, and the county council will have an opportunity, obviously, to pass on those documents. So from a big picture structure, we have an investor, which is making an investment at the time of closing. The investment is effectively kind of the present value of the future benefit of those federal income tax credits they're going to get over 7 years from the project. On the other side, we have a leverage loan being made, in this case by JEDO, with sales tax dollars. Those funds come together in an investment fund, which is a single purpose entity created specifically for the purposes of New Markets. That investment fund then makes a qualified equity investment in a community development entity. In this case, it's going to be a subsidiary of RAZA. The community development entity is the entity that gets the allocation from the federal government of these tax credits and has the ability to deploy the credits in projects in low-income communities. That CDE then will make 2 loans to our new nonprofit borrower. It'll make an A loan. The A loan corresponds to the amount of leverage that JEDO has paid in, the amount of the leverage loan. And the B loan, which corresponds to the net amount of the New Markets tax credit equity. We'll use all that money to reimburse costs that have already been incurred, the $850,000 or so you just heard reported construction to date, plus the cost of the acquisition of the project, plus the additional construction that is left to be done on the project, plus some compliance costs over the subsequent 7 years, which is the compliance period for New Markets tax credits. On or about the 7-year anniversary of the closing of the New Markets deal, the investor will have the right to put its interest in the project back to JEDO. At that point, the investor says, I've gotten what I've expected, I got the benefit of the bargain, I'm out. The investor walks away, you end up effectively owning a loan to yourself. At that point, we can collapse the structure and JEDO will own the right to determine what happens to the East Topeka Learning Center land and building at that point. So we have, if everything's going swimmingly, we can kind of continue as things are going. The contract with Washburn will run for 10 years. If structure needs to change, we can certainly do that. You could leave the building in this nonprofit and continue to kind of use that nonprofit to own that land. Some folks do that, or you could decide to convey it to a third party or keep it for yourself.
Mayor Del Isla.
So I'm making an assumption that the board of directors of that nonprofit is JEDO.
The board of directors of the nonprofit is actually going to be folks from Go Topeka. And there's a reason for that. We can't have a strong relationship between the leverage lender at the top of the structure, which is JEDO, and the borrower at the bottom, which is this new nonprofit. So this new nonprofit's board will be comprised primarily of Go Topeka folks. The other piece of this project is the nonprofit needs to have an income stream over its life to pay for its annual operating expenses, which aren't very much, but there still needs to be an income flow. That's going to be accommodated by a grant agreement between Go Topeka and this new nonprofit, where Go will agree to make a grant of those monies to the nonprofit so that it has an income stream, so that it actually is an operating business.
So my thought is that before we come to the next meeting with this, it's a lengthy process. And as I'm following it, it's almost like I could see in my head a flow chart
Yes.
with images of, here's the start, here's where it goes next. Oh. Thank you.
Just like that one?
Yeah, kind of like that one. I know I'm crazy, but it's kind of nice to know that there's other crazies out there. So my hope would be that this would be outlined in a graphic way so that as we are changing the terms that we had agreed upon, of course, all understanding that we're all going to be a part of it.
Sure.
That not only we have access to it, but as our public is taking a look at it, that they're able to just follow through with everything that's occurring so that it's transparent.
Yeah.
It's a lot of information. I'm sure that anybody that's watching at home must be going, I lost them at the board. But I just want to make sure that we are able to have that information as clear and concise as possible so that us and our constituents know exactly what's happening here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you. So if there's a nonprofit board, then how do we provide oversight of this thing? Because we are responsible to our constituents to provide oversight of this.
So there will be a contract for service. I can tell you that at least the initial draft looks exactly like the lease that this board already approved, the three-party lease, with the lease language kind of taken out of it because it's not necessary for a contract for service.
Well, my understanding, though, that lease was crafted with us still owning it. We're not going to own it, so it's
Correct.
much more complicated to provide oversight to something you don't own without any leverage in the lease.
Correct. I think one of the uncomfortable kind of components of these new markets transactions is there does have to be a little bit of trust among the parties that things will work out. So, certainly I'm sure that you'll have an opportunity to see what that contract for services looks like. Like I said, the terms of the business deal, at least in the initial draft, are substantively the same. 10-year, providing services for career training and those kinds of things. One way we could think about kind of bridging that is potentially by adding a JEDO representative to that nonprofit board.
I think that would be an excellent idea. My concern is not with the current Go folks, because they're fabulous people. Sure. I have absolute confidence.
No,
in
7
the
years is a
current
long time.
staff.
I understand.
Ding, ding.
Yeah.
Yes. So, yeah, I would be much more comfortable if we had some sort of representation on that body, just as time progresses, scopes creep and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, excellent. Thank you. I appreciate
Yes,
it. I look
absolutely.
forward to seeing something graphically.
The special meeting in June, do we just will be notified there are time requirements that we have to give for special meetings?
Yeah, we want to we'll let the progress on the documentation guide that. We'd like to have substantially final documents when we come to you so that that any changes that we might have after this body has acted on those documents that we consider to be ministerial in nature and not have to generate yet another special meeting to do that. So we'll definitely keep you, Mr. Chairman, in the loop with how we appear to be proceeding on that front and coordinate with this body on when to meet, and also cognizant that we start to lose folks in June to vacations and those kinds of things as well. So definitely.
Except for the county commission and the city who go through budgets, and we're here for all summer.
Yeah.
Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And look forward to the closing as we get into June.
Yes.
Our next item.
Item 9, action item, Community Broadband Task Force. A, presentation and report from the committee. B, request to move to Phase 3 and issue requests for information.
Good evening. My name is Gina Millsap. I'm the CEO of the Topeka and Shawnee County Public Library, and I'm honored to be presenting to you again. Per usual, we're at that, we kind of present the ultimate part of the agenda. I prefer to believe that you save the best for last. At least that's what I keep telling myself. I would like to introduce my colleagues from the Community Broadband Project Team. With me tonight are Pat Oblander, all of you know, who is head of information technology for Shawnee County. Patrick Clear, who is the technology coordinator for the Auburn-Washburn School District. Mark Biswell, who's head of IT for the city of Topeka, is ill, unfortunately, and not be able to with us tonight. And then Barbara Stapleton of Go Topeka serves as an ad hoc member of our committee since the budget for this process that we've been in was included in the Go Topeka budget. Just a few introductory remarks, and then I will introduce our consultants who are here, who are going to be presenting the results of a 220-page report in a very brief, condensed period of time, but you will know everything you need to know. First, I'm reminded of Mayor De La Isla's remarks this afternoon, where she challenged all of us at the graduation of Leadership Greater Topeka's class to have a vision for what this community can be. I'm also inspired by the discussion you've had about quality of place and quality of life, and I did note that one of the elements of quality of place has to do with good broadband enabled, I think was the phrase that was used. I also want to share with you that I've just returned from Washington, D.C., actually last night, where I was representing the Kansas Library Association along with 500 of my colleagues from around the country, and this is Legislative Day on the Hill, as many of us have, with the American Library Association. And guess what the hot topic of conversation was? Not just for libraries, but generally, it's broadband. Virtually every aide that we visited with, every member of Congress, the entire Kansas delegation has someone now devoted to and developing expertise in broadband. So I think this discussion is very timely, and I really appreciate, again, the resources that you've given us to pursue providing good information on this topic and for us to do the work that we needed to do. A brief reminder, because I don't think I've had the opportunity to speak with all of you before, that this process actually started in 2013. But time flies when you're having fun. So a lot of good work has been done in this area. If you'll recall, Mayor Larry Wolgast and Commissioner Bueller actually convened a broadband planning task force. We in turn, that originally, a lot of that planning occurred under the direction of the Kansas Department of Commerce when there was still funding for broadband planning within the state of Kansas. And then once that funding ran out, we decided that we needed to pursue our own plan locally that was community-based. We requested, and you granted us resources and permission to contract with a telecommunications consultant. That's Tilson Technology, and we did that. You approved the contract with Tilson in July of 2017. So we began our work with them in August of 2017. So it's been about 9 to 10 months, kind of like having a baby. And a lot of good work has been done during that time. Just a reminder that, and I'm sure I don't have to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, that fast, reliable internet service is essential infrastructure, just as our roads and streets are. It's for economic development and community development, supporting market expansion efforts, business creation, and offering the ability to retain and attract businesses and young people in a community. All the things we've been talking about this evening. It also supports individual and economic vitality. It really is the lifeblood of an information society. It's fueling economic growth and innovation, and it's facilitating learning and civic engagement. So with that, I would like to turn the podium over, unless you have questions for me, to our consultants. They are Christopher Campbell and David Radin.
Any questions for Ms. Millsap? Councilmember Deputy Mayor
Thank you.
Jensen. I'll get it.
Just for the folks watching, could you state the scope of what this study was to determine?
Yes, actually, it's a multi-phase project. The first was...
Well, just the particular study, I apologize.
Right. First of all, there were two studies that were done when we were still working with the Kansas Department of Commerce. One was an economic impact study, and the other was a feasibility study.
I'm sorry, just the one they're presenting on tonight. So the folks at home know what they're going to hear about.
Actually, it's a confirmation of those studies that were done. So that was included in part of this process. What they're going to be hearing tonight is the result of the work that we've done. And really what we're focusing on, I'm sorry, I should have been a little more clear about that.
No, it's no big deal. I just want to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about.
What we're presenting tonight is information, but not recommendations. We're not ready for that. You're going to be hearing about a wide range of options and models for community-based broadband, whether that's in the city of Topeka or in Shawnee County. And along with that, we are asking for permission to continue getting information, because at this point now, we've done all the work that we can do as a project team, and now we need to consult with the telecommunications provider community. And that's why we're asking for permission to issue a request for information. And this is actually still part of the agreement that we have with Tilson. And that really is still an essential part of that information gathering. Does that answer your question?
I believe so.
Okay, very good. So again, I want to emphasize this continues to be part of the contract. No additional expenses accrue from us issuing a request for information, but it really is critical for a complete and comprehensive view of what the options are for Topeka and Shawnee County moving forward with broadband. So with that, I'll turn it over to Christopher.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello. Okay, here we go. So you should have the slide deck in your packet, and in addition to that, an accompanying report that's lengthy. So we're going to try to hit the highlights tonight and talk to you about some of the process, the decisions, and some of our conclusions from the study at a high level. Okay, so let's start with a little bit of an introduction about Tilson. So Tilson is a consulting and network services company with a national practice. We generally work for owners and funders of telecommunications networks. We do a variety of things from planning, design, construction project management, maintenance, and we do consulting as well. On our public sector side, we often work with states and communities who are trying to figure out what they want to do with broadband, assess what their current situation is, and understand what their options are going forward. That's the part of the company that I'm associated with and my colleague is. Tilson is a national company with 400 employees nationwide and 18 offices nationwide, and has been growing rapidly over the last few years. So to your question, we've been retained by JEDO to help on developing and executing a plan focusing on creating public-private partnerships to realize the city and county's broadband goals. And we're right now at the first part of that. So tonight we're going to talk about first where we are in that process. We'll go to your question a little bit deeper on what are the steps that we've done and what are the steps that are upcoming. A big portion of what we've done so far is to do some financial modeling that delves a little bit deeper into work that was done in the 2014 study, as well as a review of the economic impact study that was done at that time. We'll talk a little bit about what a request for information, which would be the next step in the process, would look like, and go over that decision. And we'll give you the opportunity to ask us some questions that you may have on the presentation or on the report. I'm going to try as much as possible to avoid jargon. It's an occupational hazard in this line of work, but I do want to define a few terms that I will use tonight as part of the presentation. First thing I want to define is a fiber to the premise network. Now today, any modern telecommunications network using almost any technology has fiber optics in its core, and this transmits communication signals via light waves over tiny strands of glass. Fiber to the premise network basically extends that fiber all the way to the end user. So the signals are transmitted all the way to the end user over fiber optic cables. These types of networks are gigabit capable, which is something I'll get to in just a minute. Another type of network, and we're talking about here, is a fiber wireless network. Now, again, this is a type of network that uses high capacity fiber optic cables to backhaul to wireless nodes, and then this broadband signal is transmitted over the so-called last mile to end users via a wireless radio signal. Gigabit is a term I mentioned in one of the prior definitions. This is really simply the ability to transmit data at 1 billion bits of information per second. This is generally the highest level of service that's available to consumers today in telecommunications networks. Finally, you'll be hearing me talk about the Gigabit Cities model. The Gigabit Cities model is a network financial modeling tool that's developed by a firm called CostQuest Associates. It's a nationally known firm that has done work for communities and states and for the FCC. And it was used in the 2014 study. At that time, studying a fiber to the premise network in the city of Topeka. So that's a model that we've validated and used again here in this study. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the planning process and a little bit about stakeholder input, which has been part of this first part of the process. So where are we, to get to your earlier question? So we are at what I would call step 1A of the process. This is what we've completed so far. And step 1 is an information gathering process. Part A of that has been really building a baseline of understanding. It's been internally focused. We've been looking at helping the project team helping JEDO understand what are the economics of these fiber and wireless networks, both in the city and in Shawnee County. We've also held a couple of meetings with stakeholders where, expanding beyond the project team, they brought in representatives of other organizations in the community. We've transmitted information about various types of broadband networks and gotten feedback on goals and priorities from those stakeholders. So what were those goals that sort of bubbled out of that process? They're fairly straightforward. So the first is to achieve adequate or better broadband service in unserved parts of Shawnee County. So in some parts of Shawnee County, there is no internet service today that meets the national definition of what constitutes broadband. So first goal is really to rectify that gap. Second goal is going beyond adequate broadband, but looking at how can the city and the county spur the introduction of a more leading edge gigabit type broadband service in the region. And finally, a digital inclusion goal. How do you the goal of sharing the benefits of any of these broadband improvements as widely as possible through the communities, whether it's different parts of the county, different neighborhoods, different income groups. So let me talk a little bit about what's at stake. And this actually did not know what would be part of the presentations earlier tonight, but some of this does relate to what was said earlier in the evening. We talk about these two goals. They're related, but they're slightly different targets. So when we talk about average broadband, what's at stake is really average broadband is essential for full participation in society and the economy. We know that it's important for access to education and jobs and business and opportunity, healthcare information, social participation. And when we're talking about this, we're really talking about kind of a defensive game for economic development. You need, average, adequate broadband just to retain your workforce and your young people. We're talking about gigabit broadband, it's a little bit more about playing offense, right? Having gigabit broadband available in your community is really, you're ready for new internet applications, new internet delivered services. It's a form of signaling that this is a tech-ready community that has a solid technical infrastructure. And really it's something that communities that have this kind of service available can use it as a feature for, retaining employers and workforce, but also attracting them as well. So we've talked a little bit about what we've done so far. Let's talk a little bit about what the future steps are that are contemplated in the project plan that's related to the contract that was engaged us. So we've already talked about the internal analysis. The next phase of the information gathering is outward facing. It is actually going after a critical piece of information, which is input from service providers and other private sector providers. And the method that is in the project plan for doing that is a request for information process. Now, if you decide to go forward with that request for information process, depending upon the responses that you get from that, the project plan contemplates that you'll decide whether or not you want to do a request for proposal. So in a request for information, it'd be sort of a broad inquiry. A request for proposals would be narrowed down to a more specific type of project or public-private partnership that you may want to engage in. That's not a decision for tonight. That's a future decision, but we're kind of giving you the roadmap for where this project might be going. And then finally, also in the project plan, it contemplates that should you issue a request for proposals and should you get back a response that leads to a public-private partnership with one or more local jurisdictions in the region, that there would be an implementation phase. And that would be the final phase. But obviously that is a future decision, not the one that we're facing tonight. So next we want to go into a little bit more detail about the financial modeling that we have done and the economic impact review that we conducted on the 2014 economic impact study. I'm going to turn the microphone over to my colleague Dave Radin, who did a lot of the work validating the Gigabit Cities model that we used to produce this new financial modeling.
Thanks, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, I'm David Radin. I'm also I'm a senior consultant with Tilson, and wanted to walk you through, at a very high level at least, the financial modeling and economic impact analysis review that we commissioned and did. Again, I say at a high level because it's 220 pages, and we'd all like to get home tonight, I'm sure. So at a high level, what we did with the Gigabit Cities model on CostQuest that was used in the 2014 study was two things. So as it says on the slide, we developed local cost inputs by updating the cost assumptions that CostQuest had put in the previous version of the model. The way we did that was we got quotes on from actual vendors who are active in building these networks in Topeka to find out, what would it cost to do each piece of this project, and pushed and updated the model with those assumptions. We also verified the structure of the model. do the formulas, calculate what they say they're calculating, essentially. Next we extended the previous Gigabit Cities model, which just modeled a fiber network in Topeka, to the rest of Shawnee County. And we ran it under 4 different business models, both within Topeka and in the entire county. And these 4 different business models were the 4 most common ones that you see when you look at municipal or community broadband networks around the country. We also examined a business case for a rural fiber wireless hybrid network, which I believe Chris alluded to earlier. And that would be targeted at extending service to otherwise unserved areas in the rural parts of the county. And finally, we did a critical peer review of the 2014 economic impact study. So as you can see, here's a map of Shawnee County that's very colorful. Fiber to the premise was modeled throughout the county in different business models and different operating models. And in addition, we looked at the hybrid fiber wireless network option in 6 areas of the rural Shawnee County. Here's that fiber wireless hybrid. So on the left, you see a high-level design of the network. The red line that traces around the county, around the perimeter of the county, is the fiber backbone for this fiber wireless hybrid. And that is the actual physical fiber cable that would be built, that all of the wireless nodes would connect to. As you can see, there are lots of wireless nodes. We determined that in order to provide good service of 25 megabits down and 3 megabits up, which is the FCC's broadband definition, and is far superior to a lot of existing wireless networks that you may have experience with, that we would need upwards of 100 nodes. These can be referred to as towers, but they can be put on standard wooden utility poles, so there's no need to build lots and lots of tall towers. Some of these wireless nodes have microwave links back to the fiber, which is why you can see that they don't run through the red line. On the right side, we used signal modeling software to model how the signals would travel from each node and get a sense of what kind of service would be available. In general, green is good, yellow is moderate, and red is not good. Green generally means that I believe 90% of the premises with near and adjacent to that green dot would have good service, a good signal level received. So what did we learn from rerunning this model and updating the assumptions? Well, we determined that a pure private business case for a full fiber to the premise network across the whole city is pretty challenging, and even more so in rural areas that don't have the population density to kind of support that. We also determined that if the public sector benefits from lower interest rates and a longer investment horizon, which could make the fiber to the premise business case more self-supporting over the longer term in Topeka itself, but probably not in the county. The total capital cost required for a fiber to the premise solution is pretty substantial and probably a little higher than previously thought. And finally, a good quality fiber and wireless solution would actually be could be a cost-effective, a cost-effective solution, and is technically feasible to provide much better service than a lot of wireless networks around the country or in the area still provide. But it would not necessarily be entirely self-funding, so that's something to think about. So we mentioned the peer review of the economic impact study. Camoin Associates is a partner of ours on this project, and they are a nationally known economic development consultancy. They determined the original study uses reasonable inputs and a sound methodology, but thought that the original study perhaps overstated the growth rates and expectations a little bit. Their revised estimate was that a net boost to the county economy would be somewhere between 3 and 6.4%, depending on the specifics. So, as I mentioned, a full fiber to the premise build-out would be very expensive and may or may not be able to support itself everywhere. So incremental options that help you, that are self-supporting and can support further investment might be a good way to proceed. We also think that a lack of adequate broadband in the rural parts of the county should be a high priority, and fiber wireless can probably be a good solution there. Not every investment is by a local jurisdiction. So in that colorful map that I showed before, I can go back to that actually, perhaps. There we go. So the one thing we looked at was if we broke the potential network up into these different blocks, and each block figured out its own solution and built something within that block, would it be supported? Would it be self-supportive? And we determined it may or may not be. But to the extent that there is funding available that can be targeted to, we suggest coverage, increasing coverage in unserved rural areas, investments that will jumpstart private investment. So an example would be there are some states such as Maine that have built what's called a middle mile fiber network that internet providers can then build their own local networks to and connect to at a much lower cost to provide service than if they've had to build the whole thing themselves. And then extending existing infrastructure by existing service providers into less advantaged areas can also be a cost-effective way forward. And now I'll turn it back over to Chris to talk about the RFI.
So now let's look about what we would do next. So what we've done so far is model the economics of these networks without any particular assumption about who a local jurisdiction would be or who a private partner would be. The next stage would be now turning towards private sector providers, turning towards potential partners, and starting to engage them about some of their specific requirements, what some of the things that may be that they're willing to do. So the decision that we have today, really the decision point that we're at right now is, do you want to proceed to that next stage to gather information from private providers through a request for information process? So if we did an RFI, what would be some of the examples of who we might target? Well, some examples would be, first of all, you would want to start by targeting some of the companies that are already providing broadband service in the city and in the county, the existing incumbents. You'd also want to target regional fiber to the premise providers, people who operate these kinds of networks in other parts of Kansas or nearby states, who may be interested in expanding into a nearby area. Also, there are companies who target opportunities in mid-sized markets nationally. They look for these targets all across the country, either to operate fiber to the premise networks under contract or deliver services over a fiber to the premise network. We can help you identify who those companies are and get an RFI on their radar screen. Similarly, there are companies who seek opportunities nationally and internationally to develop fiber to the premise infrastructure through a public-private partnership. Again, we can help you identify who some of those companies are and make sure that they have the opportunity to see and respond to an RFI. Finally, because we think that a wireless solution may be an option, especially in the rural or unserved areas, we'd want to target wireless ISPs as a part of this RFI. Now, if we were to go forward with an RFI, we would, before it's issued, be coming back to you with a full RFI for you to review. But let me just cover at a high level what are some of the subjects that you might expect to see covered in an RFI. So I think first and very importantly, what are service providers willing to do without some significant or substantial public sector involvement? That's a fair question, and some of them may be able to provide you with answers that don't require you to spend much money. But beyond that, you would also, I think, want to ask about what's the level of interest, what are some of the requirements for partnering with local jurisdictions who agree to make targeted investment in broadband infrastructure and expect the private sector to respond with something in addition. So, you'd ask, well, what would these private sector providers require? What would they be willing to do if you were to provide fiber on key routes or fiber to wireless nodes or fiber to pockets of demonstrated consumer demand? In addition, you'd want to explore, there's a variety of different roles that different kinds of private entities may want to take, different ways that they may want to partner, different ways they may want to be the partner in a public-private partnership. So you'd want to ask for, are they interested in owning the infrastructure? Are they interested in not necessarily owning the infrastructure, but operating that network? Are they interested in doing both? Are they interested in being a retail service provider and providing service to end users, either over a fiber network or over a wireless network? So these are some of the types of subjects that would be included in an RFI. And again, we would be bringing back to you the full RFI for your review and approval. So if you went forward with this, here's a representative schedule that's based upon us coming back to you at your next 2 regularly scheduled meetings. So if today you approve the development of the RFI, we'd spend the summertime with the project team developing the draft RFI, have it ready for you in September for your review and approval. Then in September and October, we'd issue it, and we'd focus on outreach to providers to ensure a healthy response to it. And then by November, we'd be ready with a summary for you and be on the calendar for your next JEDO meeting to discuss what we learned and what the next steps would be after an RFI. And now I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Can we jump to page 2 of your 200-page document?
Let me try to literally get on the same page as you.
Well, because I think it's the elephant that's in the room. Didn't your study find that it was going to cost $75 million for a citywide broadband and $53 million for Shawnee County? And just doing some simple math, that's $128 million.
That is correct, and that is we actually were a range of estimates depending upon the operating model and the assumptions about the extent of the build-out, but that's probably the most representative number because it would be a kind of a standard retail model where you build out the whole city and a fraction of people decide whether or not to subscribe to it. So it's important to understand that that's the estimated total capital cost. That doesn't necessarily answer the question about who's making that investment, right? So if you're talking about a public-private partnership, really one of the key things that you're looking for in terms of feedback from providers is how do we split that up? If you, depending upon your own appetite for both the response that you get back from providers about how much it's necessary, and your own appetite and your own budgetary ability, you may choose to break a project into pieces and do sort of the most targeted strategic pieces that you that you can take on, as opposed to committing to taking on the whole of the city or the whole of the county at once.
I mean, I want all of my constituents to have access to broadband. I want all of my constituents' children to be able to study at home with broadband. But at some point, we have to, embrace the reality of $128 million. I would love to send every kid to space camp, too, and I can't afford that. I mean, at what point do we, as a board, determine whether or not this is even feasible? And Deputy Mayor Jensen.
Gentlemen, I'm disappointed. I have not read the entire 200-page study, although I intend to, but this basically tells us what we already know, that we need to provide some sort of coverage to our community in places where it's not. Your over-reliance on fiber concerns me greatly. You don't mention anything in there about next-generation satellite. I appreciate the aspect of wireless. We have a rather large coaxial copper network as well as twisted pair within the existing city footprint that's not mentioned at all in here. And I expect some of those carriers will roll that gigabit service within the city in the not too distant future. So, what about internet over power lines? Has anyone discussed that capability with Westar? I know they've done some field trials with that. There's infrastructure to the last mile there. I don't see anything about advanced LTE from wireless carriers that's in the pipeline. I'm disappointed.
So, if I may, I mean, I think it's important to put this in the context of what the study was setting out to do and where we are in the process, right? So if this study really deals with the two primary ways that if you were building a new network today, right, that you might choose to do it. If you don't have an existing network and you're choosing to build out a new broadband network, it doesn't matter whether you're a private entity or a public entity, you're going to use some sort of combination of fiber or wireless technology.
But what you've brought is an unworkable solution. We clearly don't have even $100 million to deploy a complete solution here. So I appreciate the pie in the sky, but that's not a real solution.
Well, so to be clear, I mean, we were engaged specifically to study the economics of this type of network, specifically the fiber network and the wireless network. And I understand that you're disappointed by what the answer is. I think that if we were to look at the study closely, we recognize, and we've recognized this actually, in conjunction with the project team, it very well be that an entire network is not within your budget. It's not feasible for you to do that. What we were engaged to do was to validate and extend the 2014 study. Now, recognizing that the results of that financial modeling say, hey, this is an expensive, this is a very capital-intensive proposition, and it may very well be more than you can bite off. What we've suggested are that first of all, finish the inquiry and say, what can existing providers do? What pieces, either can they do the whole thing themselves, or what pieces of either investments or operations would they be willing to partner with a local jurisdiction on? And to the extent that you have a need, you want to move forward, we've suggested some ways to target investment and to identify investments that are quite a lot less than the 75.
Every single one of your points for the RFI are fiber. On this sheet, and again, on full disclosure, I have not read the entire study, although I do intend to. Fiber and key routes, fiber wireless, fiber to pocket. I mean, we can't do an RFI for LTE over cellular if everything is fiber.
Sure. If I can delve a little bit more. If I can delve a little bit more into that. So let me give you a different number. Okay. Let me give you a different number that is also in the report.
Okay.
Okay. And so when you get to the section on the hybrid fiber wireless network, our estimate for that network was the capital cost was $7.2 million. So we looked at that as an alternative, and we said this is significantly less money than a full fiber build out. In the areas where it was there was the least business case for a full fiber build out. Right. Of that $7.2 million, actually we estimated about 65% of the cost of that was actually in the fiber backhaul servicing the network. If you look at the economics of a wireless network, really, to the extent that you've got a network that is uneconomic in a rural area, getting that backhaul to those, that collection of wireless sites is going to be one of your biggest costs.
Sure.
We modeled a particular type of wireless network, right? Because
just one particular type.
Just one particular type. But we chose the particular type because it would be the one type that you could pretty much be assured that somebody would be able to implement. Okay, so LTE networks, for instance, you have to have a license from the FCC.
And I agree with all that, but if we're going to do an RFI,
right,
I don't want to limit it to a specific technology that we think somebody can implement. I mean, the whole point is there's all kinds of emerging technology that's in the pipeline, and if we're going to kick an RFI out, I would like to see proposals on that emerging technology. I mean, there is absolutely use case for tried and true technology, and I totally get that.
Yeah.
But it's tried and true technology is also very expensive in this case.
Sure. So what I would counsel you on is really the let's put this in three broad buckets. Okay. So I would say bucket number one is you are interested in providers who are able to leverage existing cable or telephone networks.
Yes.
And you should ask about that, and that is one of our recommendations for an RFI. You should absolutely do that. But that's something that is really going to, the companies that already own those networks are going to be the ones, really the only ones who can answer those questions. And they should be the ones to answer it, and they should be asked those questions. Second category would be fiber, not necessarily because we're saying that you should take on the task of building out fiber everywhere, really. It's really because fiber across all of these networks is a common element. And it's just really a question of, how close does it get built out to the end user?
Agreed.
Okay. Third piece would be wireless. Now, my approach on wireless would be really to, I would probably encourage you to focus on what would wireless providers do if you could help them get to a point where they had economic backhaul, right? Because fundamentally, if you can do that, I'm oversimplifying this a little bit, but fundamentally, if you were to do that, then there's a business case for it, right? And you shouldn't really have to do more than that, really. So it's really a question of doing only what you need to do and not doing more.
And these are the numbers I was expecting to see in a presentation, as opposed to, we have a problem and you need to do something about it.
Sure.
I wanted to see the amount that you would recommend we subsidize to get something built to service that.
So,
correct me if I'm misunderstanding what the point of the study was, but.
And jump in here along that same line. You mentioned several times existing providers, local providers. What conversations did you have with our local providers in preparation of this report?
So the way that this project, we have not had any conversations with them so far, because the way the project plan was structured, this next phase was the phase to engage them.
So how could you even prepare a report about what options we have if you don't know what our local providers are working on building?
So the scope of our study was not to study the economics of the existing providers. The scope of the study was to give you a baseline of information about what the economics of a new network would be. That's the way that the scope of the study was.
But we're not going to build a new network. So, I mean, that we were never going to build a new network. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm not sure what we've paid for.
Commissioner Archer?
I recall asking you when we went into this, council member, if it was a good idea, and you said it was.
It's absolutely a good idea to get somebody to come in here and make some recommendations on emerging technology and working with existing carriers, what subsidy limits should be, not a report that says we have a problem we already know about, and then to build a brand new fiber to the home network.
I see your point. I don't know why we didn't make that clearer
in the proposal stage?
Well, I wasn't on the JEDO, I wasn't a voting member on JEDO at the time.
Okay.
So had I been, or on the task force, I would have absolutely made those points. But I'm just now in a position where I can do something about it. And I mean, I appreciate the work that's gone into, and as I've committed to, I will read the whole report as an IT professional. But I mean, I'm hoping there's some more information in there than what we've been presented.
So if I may, so to be fair, we submitted the RFP for your approval, correct? And you gave us permission to issue it. There's no question that we want to look at those emerging technologies, but we want that information to come from providers. And if we structure the RFI correctly, which I believe we can get to that. But we started out with the baseline level of information. And we're not at the point of making recommendations. What we are at the point of is looking at what the possibilities are in the models, and then going to the provider.
You can't until you know what we already have. But, I mean, we don't even have, there's no emerging technology in this report that I've seen. All it just says is we have a problem, and here's a recommendation to build our whole network.
Because that's the phase we're in.
When we were having the broadband discussions, were our local providers invited to those meetings and part of those meetings?
Early on, in the early part of the process, back in 2013, they were. Here was our concern about engaging providers before we got to the RFI phase. And that was that we didn't want to compromise the process by giving some providers access and not others. And so the time to engage providers is now.
But why wouldn't we want their information from the early, I mean, they're the ones that are the experts in the field, or they're providing the service. Why wouldn't we want to draw from their expertise?
And we will be.
It'd be like asking it, I can look at a book on how to do heart surgery, or I can ask a heart surgeon how to do heart surgery.
But remember, as we pursue, I mean, I come from government, right? We all work in government. When you're going through any kind of a procurement process, there is a time and a place to invite providers to respond, whether that's a request for information or a request for proposal. What we were looking at was providing broad-based objective data that was community-based.
And I guess I'm just confused as to why we would close out people that can help us through this process. I mean, I think that the more people you have at the table, the more hearty your discussion can be. So that's just...
I think we were concerned about compromising an RFI or an RFP process if some providers were included and others were not.
There's only a handful of providers in the whole community. I mean, there's only 10 that I can think of. I mean, I appreciate the work you guys have done. I mean, I'm not ready to move forward with this at all until I sort out what this thing is, other than just simply telling me we need to provide coverage for residents.
Deputy Mayor Jensen, is that a motion to table this item?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Commissioner Archer?
I think we've already paid for an RFI, haven't we?
We have.
We have, and I think absolutely we should submit one, but I want to read this and understand it, and then I think we should craft our own items we would like to see go into an RFI to hand to that team to massage with the experts before we actually submit that.
We would welcome those contributions.
But I can't read 200 pages in 20 minutes. Sorry.
So there's been a motion made by Deputy Mayor Jensen to table any further progress on the broadband task force, or for moving to phase 3 and request for a information RFI. Is that your motion?
Yes. Do we need to specify a date when we would come back and?
Well, we either come back for our September 12th meeting or a special meeting, as we discussed earlier, with the new market tax credits in June.
I'll second that motion, just based on your expertise.
Thanks.
Okay. There's been a motion made. Mayor Del Isla.
Thank you. So I could understand the questions, because I think that we all have the questions. However, would it be feasible for us to stop this if now is the point that this group is going to engage with our partners, and then allow our partners, everybody, to go ahead and start providing that information that you're looking for? Because I think that even though we didn't get the information that we thought that we were gonna get from the report initially. I think that by having the partners in the conversation right now, they'll be able to start talking about what technologies, what are the things that can be brought up, and halting this right now will stop the process of them engaging those partners.
But the way an RFI is written, the RFI has to be crafted and sent out before that conversation can happen. And I want to make sure we do the RFI right, because I'm not confident that this has been done right. And that's why I'm asking for delay, so that we have time to get the RFI part done correctly and get the answers we want back. I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I would love to do a dialogue with them now if we could, but with an RFI, we're not allowed to. We submit a request, and they send us back information. So our request has to be crafted correctly in order to get the answer. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, please.
Deputy Mayor Jensen, are you wanting to have this item come back then in the special meeting in June?
I mean, I would like to, absolutely, because time is of the essence to get this, and we have folks out there that need connectivity. So, and that's why I was asking what the timeline was, because I don't want to wait till September, absolutely, if we can avoid it.
Hold on. Commissioner Archer first, and then Councilmember Lesser.
I guess my question would be, if you don't have any confidence in the work that they've done so far, why would you have confidence in the RFI process?
Well, because the RFI process will get our local carrier's response. And it's not that I don't have confidence in the work. I mean, if they were contracted to tell us, hey, you have a problem and here's a possible answer and here's the economics of that, then without reading it, they have a lot of numbers in here I expect that would support that. But what we don't have is a solution to solve the problem. We just have a 200-page study reinforcing the problem.
But
Councilmember Lesser first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Prior to a vote, as I do notice on here on who's signed up, it looks like we have an individual from Cox, from AT&T, from Ad Astra. I would request that prior to any vote taking place, we listen to the public comment and see what.
As well we would. The motion that's on the floor, for which we would receive public comment, is a motion to table the request to move to Phase 3 and issue RFI until the July special meeting with a date to be set based on our new market tax credits. And that was motion made by Deputy Mayor Jensen, seconded by Commissioner Archer, and I see our legal counsel looking at me.
Just a very minor point, June or July, whenever.
The next meeting.
Whenever that special meeting will be held.
June or July at the next meeting of JEDO. So that is the motion, that is the second. We have members that have signed up for public comment. There are 5 members. Madam Secretary, if you could.
Megan Bottenberg, Manager of Government Affairs, Cox Communication.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all this evening. I was actually in DC myself and flew back this morning. I'm the Manager of Government Affairs for Cox Communications here in Kansas, and we are thrilled at what an exciting time right now it is here in Topeka. Our city is growing, and we have great sites ahead of us. But Cox wants to be a part of it. We have 65 employees here in Topeka, 1,100 statewide, and we are committed to seeing Topeka grow. We are throughout your city. We are in Auburn and in Silver Lake. Cox has been an innovator in the development and deployment of advanced telecommunication technologies to connect our customers, whether they're residential or business. Now, while, as we have discussed tonight, your intent to ensure everyone in Shawnee County has broadband access, we at Cox believes this is a worthy goal and one that is best achieved with private-public partnerships. Government-owned networks have not been successful across the country. Cities who have tried have been saddled with debt, struggled to invest in networks, and failed to meet customers' needs and demands. And I would caution you, as you have discussed, spending $75 million for only 39% of the population, does that really help us get to meet our solutions and solve the problem? This is obviously highly optimistic, since private competitors such as Cox will be providing the same service, and same speeds and a lot sooner by the end of this year. And we'll have a much broader marketing effort. Companies, we ask that you listen to the companies who have long invested in your community. We want to help you solve this problem. We have employees who live here, who work here, and want to be part of the solution. So instead of spending dollars on a solution we argue that would not solve the problem or the priority issues you have outlined, on behalf of Cox, I ask that you let the partners who are committed and invested in your community be at the table. Let's be innovative together. Let's do something really cool for Topeka so that we can be the model for broadband solutions across the state and maybe even the country. Over the past 16 years, we have increased our data speeds 1,000%. And right now, we have 300 megs available to our residential customers and 10 plus gig for business customers. And by the end of this year, Topeka will be a gig city. We will provide gig service to all of our residential customers throughout our national footprint, but especially here in Kansas, Auburn, as well as Silver Lake and Topeka. All of this with no expenditure to the city. So to the report's desire to have a gig service, we are pleased to make this another example of our commitment to Topeka and all of Kansas. Additionally, to bridge the digital divide, Cox Communications offers low-cost internet and devices to low-income students and their families through our Connect to Compete program. And earlier this year, the legislature passed a bill that establishes a task force to solve this exact problem for all of Kansas. We welcome the opportunity to work with you all and all of our leaders and partners to bring our services and products to more people and help close the digital divide. It is our hope that the focus is on the efforts to solve the problems we are truly trying to solve, and that the answers to these problems be private or public-private partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie Kupal, Area Manager of External Affairs, AT&T Kansas.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you. I am Katie Kopal, the Area Manager of External Affairs for AT&T. Topeka and Shawnee County are not alone in looking at this issues. AT&T has had similar conversations with several other municipalities in Kansas. As Megan already said, we were also involved with the conversation in the State House regarding the Broadband Task Force. AT&T wants to be involved in this conversation. We don't want to be an obstructionist, but we think we can contribute. Consumers are clearly demanding improved access at greater speeds. To meet that demand, AT&T is investing over $100 billion in improving our network. In Kansas, that means expenditures of over $775 million between 2014 and 2016, and they've increased since 2016. We have approximately 900 miles of fiber in Kansas, and with plans to build even more. In Topeka, business customers already have access to fiber, and residential customers will have that opportunity later this year. AT&T is committed to using new and innovative technology to expand broadband access to more homes and businesses. We are participating in the FCC Connect America Fund to improve internet offerings to all Americans. In Kansas, we're spending $19 million a year over 5 years to connect over 35,000 homes and businesses in high-cost census blocks as determined by the FCC. This is being done with some pretty cool technology. We actually tested it in Colby, just a few hours down the road from here. It's called fixed wireless. It delivers broadband through the air using a base station and a fixed antenna, which is about the size of a pizza box that's mounted on a customer's home. This is a cost-effective method to deliver high-speed internet to rural customers. Another exciting technology that's in the testing phases, but is scheduled for deployment in 2020, is called Project AirGig. This is intended to address the problem of providing service to customers in that last mile of service you were talking about. Traditionally, this is the most expensive part to deploy using traditional methods. Project AirGig will deliver low-cost, multi-gigabit wireless internet speeds using power lines. The technology powers itself without a direct connection to the wires to create a more affordable and easily deployable technology. The signal will travel along and near the wires, but not through it. It will reduce the need for new towers, for new builds, for less building, which means it will be easier to deploy. One perception providers have frequently encountered is that if you build it, customers will come. Not everyone who has access, though, is subscribing, especially in Kansas where the adoption rate is lower than the national average. 97.3% of households in Kansas have internet access with a minimum of 10 megabits per second, compared to the national average of 95.9%. Unfortunately, only 57% of those Kansas households are currently subscribing. So one way AT&T is addressing this problem is through our low-cost internet program called Access from AT&T. It's available to households where at least one member is a SNAP recipient, and they get internet for a monthly fee of between $5 and $10 a month. Over the past month, I have met with several of you and have enjoyed our conversations. Among the items we have discussed is that if government wishes to get involved in the broadband industry, they should place a priority on ensuring a level playing field exists, allowing providers to take advantage and encourage us to quickly deploy those new technologies, and work with providers to address the adoption challenges. We believe the most effective partnerships are those that harness the capabilities and efficiencies of private commercial networks, and we look forward to working with all of you to find a creative, cost-effective, and achievable solution for Topeka and Shawnee County.
Thank you.
Carl Watson, Ad Astra Fiber.
Hi, I'm Carl Watson. I'm the owner of Ad Astra Fiber. I'm not completely familiar with format. Can questions be asked, or is this just me talking?
Typically, it's you talking.
Just me talking? Okay,
Yeah.
I'll do my best. I moved to Topeka 2 years ago by choice. Like to think that I'm homegrown talent that fits into Momentum 2020. We've got a powerful strategy going into Topeka, especially downtown. One of the first things that I did was join 712 Innovations as an entrepreneur and started a business. Unfortunately, I didn't know what business that I wanted to start. I had 6 ideas: Internet of Things, natural spoken language, artificial intelligence, 2 others that I can't think of, and broadband. And I continue to work in each of those areas. I've got projects that are ready to go forward as an entrepreneurial endeavor. My passion project is broadband right now. A year and a half ago, I formed a business, talked to a lot of community leaders, got my feet on the ground, realized that this process was going underway to study the market. I think that was the right thing to do. I'd like to support what Gina's trying to do with that tonight. I'm a provider. I want to be included, but I want you all to understand what this is before you start to request information from me, or more importantly, my bigger competitors, AT&T and Cox. And so I think it's very important that we have a level playing field. It's difficult for an individual like myself to get on a level playing field in this environment. But luckily, I've got things like 712 and an entrepreneurial community here to help me. And let me tell you the specifics. A year and a half ago when I decided to do this, I had almost no money. And since then, I've spent about $30,000 that is mostly on credit card debt to bring up my first site with 100 homes that are connected with fiber and Wi-Fi. Fiber runs to the building, and then I do Wi-Fi connections so that there's no equipment required and no sign up, no appointment for any of the people that live in the homes. I've got 100 sites that I put in by myself. That's the type of action that an entrepreneur can do. Now, I don't think that's plan A for this city. I can't do the city and the whole county. But I want to offer you plan B, which is Carl Watson can show up and get things done. I've got a very strong financial background. I've got an electrical engineering degree from Kansas State. I've worked at Payless U-Source. I managed a $100 million expansion project for Payless U-Source. I know what that money means. With my finance background, I know how to control it, I know how to staff it, and I know how to manage it. I'm here tonight to tell you, you've got a great resource over at 712. I'm ready to help. I think this process needs to go forward as fast as you can, Because on my clock, we're not any further ahead than when we changed our name to Google Fiber. Was that 6 years ago, 7 years ago?
Yeah.
You
8
guys
years
can
ago.
keep track. I'm gonna go back tomorrow and I'm gonna work on my fiber customers, because I got raving fans, and they want this. And they aren't high-end homeowners. These are everyday, they just want access. They've got kids that want to learn. And it's my passion project. I think you can hear my passion. I'd take any questions that you have now or at any time that you want. I'm 2 blocks away every day of the week, and whatever I can do to help you understand what I'm trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carl.
Okay.
Clark Trammell.
I respectfully pass. Welcome.
Lizone Grace.
Good evening, members of the JEDO. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. There are people who know that I've been engaged in this conversation from the very beginning. When that question came up about doing the RFP for that, I brought that up because there were things that just wasn't in there that are now the parts of discussion. But I think one of the commissioners at that time said, you know, we'll just take care of it down the road. And now down the road, it just sort of, you know, has caught up with us. This is Digital Inclusion Week nationwide, so it's part of talking about, you know, bringing access to those underserved communities and individuals and communities. I want to go back to, this was an article, December 16, 2015, when the JEDO actually approved its 2016 budget that included $250,000 for Workforce Internet Broadband Initiative. After that vote, the conversation quickly moved on to downtown, parts in the county, and my biggest fear is that as you expanded that conversation, then this little one part of it was going to get sucked up into a $50 or $70 million bill that nobody's going to be able to pay. So I guess it went to an RFP to see not for the workforce development initiative, but for the whole city and the county. And I would hate to see something such small, Scott Smathers came and spoke at that night. I'd hate to see something that is very small and minute be derailed because we are being forced to look at this huge picture. I would have hoped that, as Councilman Jensen mentioned, you know, maybe I'm just a sort of simplistic type of guy. I look at maps like the city map of poverty and the composite, and the red areas are intensive care and the pink areas are at risk. And my next question is there a digital divide in these areas? It's either yes or no. If it is, what are the recommendations of models on wireless or fiber to the premise that could be potential solutions? And what are the costs of those? Couldn't find my map of Montera, but I can see these red areas. My understanding from the workforce investment portion is to try, I've always come here to speak to the digital divide. Does Highcrest have a digital divide issue? I don't know. There's maybe some targeted projects that can do in that area. What about Montera that is outside of the city in the county? That's a whole low-income community. Does it have a digital divide? If so, what's the prospective recommendations for that? I think that it could have been Oakland, it could have been North Topeka. I think that that's the type of basic information that would have helped make a better decision on targeting some of the $250,000, or if you want to go even higher than that. As far as, you paid for a technical report, and that's what you got at guys at that level right here. But I was hoping that we have some targeted populations, you know, maybe there isn't a so-called real digital divide in parts of East Topeka or in Montera, but there is some things that need to be done to enhance. Digital inclusion and digital equity is, to a certain degree, two separate things. Maybe there's certain type of programming that needs to go on in the Highcrest area, in a building that are already there, that deals with digital equity. Teaching young people, I've worked with the Google Fiber from the time that they rolled out the fiber to making sure that the lowest income neighborhood in the state, make sure that they got fiber, and they have some robust things going on. I've invited and taken some other people, there. And I'm going to ask for a few more minutes, please.
Motion to extend.
Motion to extend.
Motion made by Councilmember Lessner to extend. Second by Councilmember Padilla. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes.
Thank you. These are the things that I hope that before maybe, I don't know, I am not a part of the stakeholders. I would like to see more diversity of people and minds sitting on that, because I think that some of the conversation that should have been had was missed. I took Matt and some others down to Kansas City to see some of the sites and the things that are going on in these neighborhoods, in these community centers. These are the type of things that I would like to envision in a Montera, or in Avondale East, or North Topeka, or someone else. And maybe another ship needs to go down there. So I sort of agree with Councilman Jensen. I am impressed with the technicalities of the proposal, but I think that it did not give what we could really use for the community on, okay, where do we go next? Here's the first economic development strategic plan that was had, that the county and the city passed on. Here's a map. Let's say that this is Montera. There is or is not a digital divide. These are the recommendations of the fiber or the wireless, and this is approximately how much it would cost. What areas in the city and the county that have high populations of people needing to get to work, where are those places, and can they put a map together that is easy for individuals to chew on? I think that that would be simple. I don't think that there's a $7 million need to do anything to address any digital divide in a Highcrest area or in a Montera. Maybe that's only $50,000. But we would never know. I come and talk about digital divide, but this report never really tells me if there's any digital divide whatsoever and where exactly it is, and if there is one at all. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Again, the motion that's on the floor is a motion to table the request to move to Phase 3 and issue RFI made by Deputy Mayor Jensen, seconded by Commissioner Archer, and this would be then taken up in either the June or July meeting. Is there any further discussion by the board? Seeing none, if we could have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Archer?
Aye.
Mayor De La Isla?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Padilla?
Yes.
Councilmember Lessner?
Yes.
So it passes. We will take this up in the June or July meeting. Ms. Billsap, if you had a question.
Actually, I need to request the direction. What do you want to see from us at the next meeting so that we're very targeted?
Perhaps it would be easiest if you were to communicate with the JEDO board members, not just voting, but all JEDO board members, as to what concerns they may have, and we may be able to flesh some of those things out. Please keep in mind that we do have rules against open meetings. If there are gatherings of us, especially among commissioners, it would be best one-on-one discussions.
I would be happy to meet with you if you'd like to at any
great.
time to discuss. Just let me know what your schedule
That would
is.
be
and we'll
great.
make it work.
I do, and again, I do want to say that our consultants actually did what we asked them to do. So if there's information lacking at this point, which we are committed to getting, then I accept responsibility for that, and I think we all kind of accept responsibility for that because we approved the RFP that outlined what was expected. So, thank you.
Thank you. Our next item.
Item 10, any other business that may come before the board?
I don't know that there is any other business, so we would move on then to our next item.
Item 11, public comment. We have 4 individuals signed up. The first is Joseph Ledbetter.
Evening, governing body again. Just teeing off what was spoken about earlier with place and quality of living, I just wanted to make some further additional comments. On that committee, place, I'd like to put one into the record and pass one to the members. One of the things that came up was we do have infrastructure under quality place, and we did put, and this was voted on by the group, streets and roads, highway entries and exits, highway rebuilding, public parks and recreation system, traffic light coordination. That was one that was a hot button issue. But Parks and Rec got into this, and one of the things that I am hearing a lot of, not just on Momentum 2022, but also in the general public and the support for Parks and Rec, is that people want Parks and Rec to be well supported and well funded. One of the things that came out of a master plan, which I was not part of, but there was some public interaction on it, and I'm just going to pass this out, was that people want, the master plan says create a balance of park types in each quadrant of the county. That's 4 parts, and that includes each a fourth of the city. And then identify and acquire land to preserve, it's getting late, and enhance access to natural resources, open spaces, and outdoor recreation. I'd like to pass that out, one for the record and one for each of the members. Where I'm going with this, I'm not sure I gave you enough here. A couple more. A discussion's come up about 155 acres being located that the Girl Scouts have now closed a camp. We've looked at it as the advisory with Parks and Rec. It got a 9-to-1 vote, asking the commission, Parks and Rec director, to move forward on it, at least negotiate with the Girl Scout Council. And I want to show you how anemic the park system is in that quadrant, because in quadrant 3, there's only 151,000 visits to parks in that area versus the quadrant 4 of 1.4 million. Now that does include Lake Shawnee, and certainly we want to see Lake Shawnee succeed, and it obviously has. But that quadrant is 400% below the next closest quadrant in park use, because there is nothing to use in that area. So when we're looking at quality of place, we're looking at people want, in this community, natural open park spaces. When we have an opportunity to buy it, it's not going to come around very often to get something of that size or that magnitude, or that actually adds that much quality of life and quality of place to a community. In talking to a lot of people, I've talked to people, they want to do horseback riding in this county. There is no place to do it. There is out there. They want to do more fishing. There's no place to fish in that part of the county. They want to use natural trails. That is a big item right now. It's a hot item. And so I'm going to continue to hopefully have at least a few more discussions. I have continued to discuss this with John Knight. And I'm going to continue to discuss with the public as long as the public's interested in it. Thank you.
Keith Warda.
Decline comments.
Clark Trammell.
It's been a long evening, so let's perk up because it's almost time to go home. I really came here tonight to support 2 people. One, LaZone Graves in his position on broadband, and the other is Joe Ledbetter in his recommendation on Camp Daisy. And you're dealing with 2 people that I know you all recognize. They're intelligent, they're bright, they don't speak unless they know from where they speak. And LaZone is absolutely correct with what he's saying, and I hope you all take that to heart and incorporate that into your process to get to your RFI. I would like to say to these nice people back here, I think they did an excellent job. As a businessman, I don't know them. I do know the librarian. I do not know the other two gentlemen, but I think they did what you hired them to do. And they do not deserve any criticism for doing the job, but they do need to assist in bridging to get you to the point where you so clearly told them you need to be. So I'm just adding that as a third-party input to that conversation. As far as what Joe's talking about, Camp Daisy, that is quality of life and that is quality of place. And I mentioned to you all earlier that I think you should step back and redefine what you mean by economic development. Because economic development is the generation of revenue. It's not just the creation of jobs. It isn't the growing of a business. It's the creation of revenue. There are places that do that. Camp Daisy would be a revenue creator. The Jayhawk Theater is a revenue creator. Harlan Park is a revenue creator. That is economic development, and it needs to be included in that scope of what you look at when you're spending money dealing with Topeka and creating a revenue base that takes the generations now coming forward that are looking for a place to live and why first, and then get the job, rather than the older generation that got the job and then moved. It's a whole different strategy. So let's create these perks. The park downtown, that's going to be a revenue generator. That's economic development, redefined specifically in today's terms. So there's a lot discussed this evening. I think we all want to join hands and see this move forward. The broadband thing is extremely important. I just heard a number of investors get up here and talk about their product. Boy, bring them to the table. Get your checkbook out. Let's talk. Those are the people that need to be at your table to have the discussion. Where's the money going to come from? Where is it we need to put it? How are we going to do it? Is it going to go down the power lines or is it going to come underground? But get it done. The talent is here. The money is here. The partners that want to sit at the table just told you they're here. The Zone Gray should be at the table for that aspect of the community. And let's do it. You all are ready. I can see it in your faces. You're tired, but you're ready to get it on. Let's go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carol Marple.
On that note, I'll pass.
Adjournment?
We are out of items. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we are adjourned.